My brother laughed at my silly little app for 8 years, right up until he secretly stole my source code to launch his own tech division. So, I waited until his lavish 36th birthday party, hijacked the venue's projector, and showed his investors, his girlfriend, and our parents exactly who the real mastermind was. You ever get that suffocating feeling like your own flesh and blood is just sitting in the bleachers, eating popcorn, and waiting for you to completely ruin your life? Like they're watching you try something unconventional, not because they want to cheer you on, but because they are absolutely desperate to say, "I told you so." Yeah, that was the overarching theme of my entire 20s. My name is Liam. I'm 32 years old now, and for the better part of the last decade, my family treated me like a walking, talking punchline. I was never the golden child. That prestigious title was permanently glued to my older brother, Julian. Julian was tall, charismatic, aggressively confident, and a straight-A student who seamlessly transitioned into a corporate darling. He was the guy who could literally do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was the family basement dweller, still working on that silly app thing. They used to say it exactly like that, every single syllable dripped with condescension. Still tinkering with that silly app thing, Liam? My mom would ask during our mandatory Sunday dinners. Her voice was always coated in this sugary sweetness, but underneath, it was sharp as a razor, as if she was genuinely terrified I hadn't outgrown some embarrassing childhood phase. My dad would just chuckle over his expensive Cabernet, trying and failing to hide a smug smirk. And Julian? Julian would just stare at me from across the mahogany dining table with the exact same arrogant expression he wore when he bankrupted me in Monopoly when we were 10. He looked at me like he owned Boardwalk and Park Place, and I was still scraping together pennies to pay rent on Baltic Avenue. Our family wasn't billionaire wealthy, but my dad did incredibly well for himself. He owned a highly successful, mid-sized real estate firm in the city called Sterling & Croft. It had been growing steadily for 30 years, and the unspoken heavily spoken plan was always for Julian to inherit the throne. They literally gave Julian a sprawling corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows the Monday after he graduated from business school. They didn't even insult the rest of the world by pretending to interview other candidates. By the time Julian was 26, he was driving a $120,000 Porsche 911, living in a luxury downtown penthouse, and parading around with a title that included the words Executive Vice President of Strategic Growth, whatever the hell that actually meant. Me? I graduated with a computer science degree, 0 job prospects I actually wanted, and a half-baked idea for an application that I just couldn't get out of my head. It started as my senior capstone project. A comprehensive scheduling, invoicing, and logistics tool for blue-collar freelance workers. I'm talking plumbers, HVAC technicians, general contractors, and movers, people who constantly got double booked, lost track of paper invoices, or bled potential revenue because they didn't have the time, capital, or tech savvy to manage calls, quotes, and active jobs simultaneously. In the beginning, my app, which I called Times TaskFlow Core, was a mess. The user interface was objectively hideous, a chaotic blend of gray boxes and clunky buttons. The back-end architecture was essentially held together by digital duct tape and sheer willpower. But it worked. It solved a real problem. The literal second I told my parents I was declining 2 very safe, very lucrative junior developer job offers to build TaskFlow Core full-time, it was as if I had just announced I was joining a circus to become a professional mime. What about a 401k? What about health benefits? My mom gasped, clutching her pearls. What about getting a real job that actually contributes to society? My dad scoffed, shaking his head. It's cute that you want to be Mark Zuckerberg, buddy, Julian chimed in, patting my shoulder patronizingly. But don't you think the SaaS space is a little saturated for a one-man band? I brushed off their negativity at first. I genuinely believed that once they saw the working prototype, once they saw actual human beings paying monthly subscriptions to use my software, they would finally get it. But that day of validation never arrived. Every family gathering, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas morning, someone, usually Julian, would make a targeted jab. Still playing Steve Jobs in your pajamas? He'd ask loudly in front of our extended relatives, making it sound like I was playing dress-up in my bedroom. The most agonizing part was that I kept foolishly expecting the mockery to stop. I thought maybe hitting my first 1,000 active users would impress them. I thought maybe securing my first regional plumbing franchise as a B2B partner would earn a nod of respect. I thought maybe moving out of the cramped, moldy apartment I shared with 3 loud roommates and into a clean, modern studio of my own would prove I was an adult. But it was never, ever enough. Not when compared to Julian, who closed a massive deal on a 1-2 unit commercial retail space, the exact same week I celebrated my startup's first profitable quarter. You can guess whose triumphant story dominated the dinner conversation that Friday night. Over the years, I learned to build a fortress around my emotions. I completely stopped bringing up TaskFlow Core around them. My company was growing slowly, organically, and sustainably, and I convinced myself I didn't need their approval. But if I'm being brutally honest, deep down in my core, I craved it. I just wanted to walk into a family Thanksgiving, just one single time, without feeling like the designated disappointment. I wanted my dad to ask about my server costs or user acquisition strategies with genuine curiosity, rather than polite, pitying nods. I wanted my mom to brag about my code the way she bragged about Julian's real estate deals, as if he were a local celebrity. Julian was actually on a billboard once for Sterling and Croft. My mom made it her Facebook cover photo and left it there for 4 consecutive years. But the Thanksgiving that permanently fractured our family started the exact same way all the others did. With fake smiles, dry turkey, and subtle psychological warfare. I arrived about 30 minutes late. I had been locked in a tense, high-stakes Zoom negotiation with a massive venture capital firm based out of Tokyo, desperately trying to finalize the terms before the holiday weekend. When I finally walked through the front door, Julian was already in peak performance mode, holding court in the living room, aggressively detailing his latest strategic acquisition to my captive cousins. My mom waved a dismissive hand in my direction and said, "Liam, there's a folding chair at the far end of the table," treating me like the weird kid who showed up late to the middle school cafeteria. She didn't ask why I was late. She didn't care. She just assumed I had overslept or lost track of time playing video game. I took my designated seat next to my uncle, who immediately leaned over and asked, "So, kid, you still doing that little computer tech thing?" I gave my heavily rehearsed, dead-eyed smile and nodded, trying to keep my blood pressure down. It wasn't worth the energy to explain. Not today. We ate. We drank. They laughed. Julian launched into a 20-minute monologue about negotiating a hostile commercial lease, and everyone at the table acted like they were listening to a thrilling true crime podcast. I tried to interject a few times, just to participate in my own family's existence, but every single time I opened my mouth, someone talked over me. It was like I was emitting a frequency only dogs could hear. "Oh, Liam is talking about his widgets again," my aunt whispered at one point. "Let's get back to Julian's commercial property saga." Then came dessert. Pumpkin pie, pecan tart, and Julian's absolute favorite post-meal activity. The casual, public execution of my self-esteem. He leaned back in his custom-tailored chair, elegantly wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and locked eyes with me. He flashed that exact same childhood smirk. "So, Liam," he projected, his voice booming loud enough to force the entire dining room into absolute silence. "Still playing CEO?" I froze. My fork hovered over my pie. It wasn't the first time he had used that specific insult. It wouldn't be the last, but for some inexplicable reason, this specific jab felt like a physical blow to the chest. Maybe because I was running on 3 hours of sleep. Maybe because the ink had literally just dried on the biggest, most life-altering contract of my entire existence the night before. Maybe because I knew exactly what was about to happen in about 60 seconds, and they were completely oblivious. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled softly, shrugged my shoulders, and reached for the can of whipped cream. Exactly 15 minutes later, the massive 7.5-inch flat-screen TV mounted over my dad's stone fireplace, which was quietly playing a local news channel on mute, suddenly flashed a vibrant, unmissable breaking news graphic. Local tech startup acquired for $65 million. The banner scrolled in bright, aggressive red lettering across the bottom of the screen. And right above it, taking up half the display, was a massive picture of my face. It was my outdated LinkedIn headshot from 3 years ago. I actually made a mental note in that exact moment to hire a professional photographer. Julian, who was mid-sentence about his golf handicap, turned his head, saw the screen, and stopped talking. He stared at the television for a beat too long. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But on the outside, I remained completely, terrifyingly calm. I took a slow bite of my pie. My uncle dropped his wineglass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, spilling dark red liquid everywhere. Nobody moved to clean it up. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide as saucers. My dad leaned so far forward in his chair I thought he was going to snap the wood, squinting at the screen as if trying to decode a foreign language. And Julian. Julian's face drained of all color. He went absolutely, shockingly pale. He looked like he had just watched a ghost walk through the wall. He slowly turned his head back to me, blinking rapidly. Is that you?" he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't answer him right away. I let the silence stretch out, thick and suffocating. Because this wasn't just about the $65 million. This was about 8 grueling years of dinners, birthdays, and holidays where I was systematically made to feel microscopic. Where my grueling 8-0-hour work weeks weren't considered real work because they didn't come with a nepotism-fueled corporate title or a company-leased Porsche. "Yeah, Julian," I finally said, my voice steady and quiet. "I guess I'm still playing CEO." That should have been the moment of ultimate triumph. It should have been the cinematic climax where they all apologized, wept, and carried me out on their shoulders. But as I sat there, Watching my family fumble through their shock, I didn't feel victorious. I felt entirely hollow. I realized in that dining room that the years I had spent clawing my way through their ridicule couldn't be magically erased by a television headline, not even a $65 million one. Julian just stared at the screen as if the news anchor had just deeply insulted him on a personal level. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter, but he didn't utter a single word of congratulations. My dad forcefully cleared his throat, desperately trying to pivot the energy in the room. "Well," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look at that. Guess that little app turned out all right after all. No hugs. No cheers. No warmth. Just profound discomfort, as if my massive success had violently disrupted the natural, established hierarchy of the universe." My mom stayed completely silent. She didn't ask a single question about the acquisition. She just frantically began clearing the dessert plates, scrubbing at the spilled wine on the floor as if she had suddenly remembered hygiene was a matter of life and death. That profound silence stung worse than any insult Julian had ever hurled at me. They weren't proud of me. They were threatened. Because for the first time in my 32 years of life, they could no longer ignore me. Update 1? The tension didn't end at Thanksgiving. It rapidly mutated into something far more insidious. Weeks after the acquisition, my inbox was a war zone. Reporters, old high school bullies, aggressive recruiters, and distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade were all crawling out of the woodwork, begging for a slice of my time or my newly acquired wealth. I ignored almost all of them. I was already quietly sketching out the architecture for my next massive project, but I kept my mouth firmly shut. For the first time in my life, I felt a profound sense of lightness. I stopped over-explaining my career to people. I stopped hoping my family would suddenly develop empathy. But then, the phone calls from my parents started. At first, it was subtle manipulation. My mom called on a Tuesday afternoon, her tone dripping with that old, fake sweetness. "Liam, honey, I was wondering if you could sit down with Julian and look over a new project he's spearheading. Now that you've both found your way in the world, maybe you could help each other out." Found my way. She phrased it as if I had been wandering aimlessly in the woods for a decade and accidentally tripped over a bag containing $65 million. I politely declined, citing a busy schedule, fully aware of the trap being laid. A week later, my dad called. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Liam," he barked, using his authoritative CEO voice, "I think it's time you seriously consider giving back to the family. We've all supported you through the years, haven't we? It's time to show some loyalty." I actually laughed out loud. Supported me? They openly mocked me. Julian once told a room full of our relatives that I was the family's resident IT support guy who works for exposure. "Dad," I said, my voice deadpan, "I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not looking to merge my capital with Sterling and Croft, if that's what you're hinting at." He paused, clearly agitated that I saw right through him. "It's not just about capital, Liam. It's about legacy. You have something highly valuable now, a brand, a reputation in the tech sector. You could drastically strengthen the Sterling and Croft name if you brought your resources under our umbrella. You and Julian, co-directors of digital innovation. Our umbrella." There it was. This was entirely about control. They didn't care that I had built something revolutionary. They wanted to absorb me, rebrand my success, slap the family name on it, and pretend to the country club that they had engineered my victory all along. I firmly told him absolutely not, and I hung up. That rejection sparked a Cold War. At our annual Christmas gathering, Julian showed up driving a brand new, top-of-the-line Rivian R1T. He made absolutely sure to shout across the kitchen, while loudly pouring spiked eggnog, that it was 100% self-funded through sheer hard work. I didn't say a single word, but I watched my dad aggressively slap Julian on the back, proudly declaring him a true, gritty entrepreneur. When it was time for the gift exchange, Julian handed me a poorly wrapped rectangle. I opened it to find a paperback book titled, "Leadership for the Clueless: How to Manage When You're Not Ready." The entire room erupted into roaring laughter. I forced a polite chuckle, digging my fingernails into my palms so hard they bled, fighting every instinct to stand up and flip the coffee table. Later that evening, my cousin Marcus, who used to work in the accounting department at Sterling and Croft before fleeing to a tech startup, pulled me aside in the hallway. "Man, they really don't let up on you, do they?" he whispered, looking genuinely sympathetic. "It's whatever," I sighed. "I'm used to the circus." Marcus gave me a dark, serious look. "You shouldn't be." I drove home that night to my apartment and sat in the dark for 2 hours. I realized I hadn't even opened the one email that actually mattered to me that day. A confirmation receipt from a university. I had secretly donated $150,000 to completely fund a full-ride scholarship for underrepresented, low-income software engineering students. I hadn't told a single soul in my family. I knew if I did, they would find a way to taint it. It was the one pure thing I kept entirely for myself. Then came January, and the subtle disrespect escalated into outright warfare. Sterling and Croft proudly issued a massive press release announcing a brand new division, Sterling Digital Expansion. Julian proudly updated his LinkedIn banner to read Lead Innovator and VP of Tech Integration. I rolled my eyes and tried to ignore it, assuming he had just hired a third-party firm to build a basic CRM system. But then, Marcus forwarded me the internal press packet and slide deck that Julian was distributing to local investors. I opened the PDF, and my blood ran ice cold. Sterling and Croft was supposedly building a revolutionary, all-in-one software platform for property and contractor scheduling. The marketing copy was nearly identical to the original pitch deck I had written for TaskFlow Core 4 years ago. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, and read it again. And again. They hadn't just copied my general concept. They had stolen the specific language, the exact database structure, the target demographic, and the pricing tiers. But the most damning piece of evidence was on slide 14. It was a screenshot of the upcoming user interface. It was eerily, unmistakably identical to the early, buggy prototype of TaskFlow Core that I had personally demoed to Julian in my living room years ago. Back when I naively thought my big brother was actually taking an interest in my life. I sat completely paralyzed, my mouth bone dry. This wasn't petty sibling rivalry anymore. This wasn't a snide comment over turkey. This was blatant, quantifiable intellectual property theft. I called my intellectual property lawyer, a ruthless guy named David, at 7 a.m. the next morning. He demanded every single document I possessed: emails, time-stamped Git repositories, encrypted messages, early design files. Thankfully, the years of being mocked had turned me into an obsessive record keeper. I had an ironclad paper trail. I just never in a million years expected I would need to weaponize it against my own flesh and blood. David reviewed the files for 3 days. When he finally called me back, his voice was grim. Liam, you have an incredibly strong case for IP theft and corporate espionage, but lawsuits are a bloodbath, especially when they involve immediate family. Are you prepared to destroy them in federal court? I told David to draft the paperwork, but not to file it. Not yet. A lawsuit would take years, cost millions in legal fees, and ultimately, Julian would just play the victim. He would spin a narrative that his wealthy, vindictive younger brother was trying to crush the family business out of spite. I needed something far more devastating than a settlement. I needed undeniable, public humiliation. I needed the world to see the theft with their own eyes. So, I waited. I lurked in the shadows, monitoring Julian's every move. The confirmation I needed arrived a month later. Julian confidently called me on a gloomy Monday morning. I stared at his name on my phone screen for a full minute before answering. Liam, buddy. Julian chirped, his voice dripping with faux camaraderie, as if we were old frat brothers catching up. So, listen. I've been doing some heavy thinking. There's actually a massive opening on our new digital strategy team. Dad and I were talking, and we thought, maybe you'd want to come on board? Bring your little tech expertise to the big leagues? I sat in absolute silence, the phone pressed hard against my ear. And, hey, Julian continued, completely unfazed by my silence. I know things were a little tense around Christmas with the book joke, but this is a highly lucrative offer. We'd make you a senior manager, maybe even director level in a few years if you perform well. It's a lot of stability, Liam. You need a safe harbor. A profound realization washed over me. Julian wasn't calling to rub his new division in my face. He was calling because he was terrified. He was trying to absorb me into his ecosystem to legally neutralize the threat. Deep down, he knew exactly what he had stolen, and he knew that I had the technical skills to instantly recognize my own stolen architecture. I let out a low, dark chuckle. Julian, are you seriously offering me a middle management job at a real estate company that is currently trying to build a carbon copy of the software I just sold for $65 million? There was a long, heavy pause on the line. Then, Julian let out a dismissive scoff. Oh, come on, man. Don't be dramatic. It's not stealing, it's just business iteration. Besides, you walked away from that specific scheduling idea years ago when you pivoted the backend, didn't you? You don't own the concept of a calendar. I hung up the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. I just quietly, systematically snapped. There is a very specific, unique kind of psychological agony when you finally accept that the people who were biologically obligated to protect and uplift you will gleefully rip you to shreds the exact second your existence threatens their fragile egos. I spent the next 3 days in a catatonic fog. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I just lay on the floor of my apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling like an absolute fraud. Julian had taken everything I built, rebranded it, and claimed it for the very family that told me I was a failure. I started spiraling into intense self-doubt. Maybe I was naive. Maybe Julian really was just a superior, more ruthless businessman. That was the lowest point of my entire life. But then, an email arrived that changed the trajectory of everything. It was from Elena, the fiercely intelligent operations director at a highly respected local tech incubator. I had met Elena exactly once, 2 years prior, at a chaotic startup pitch competition. She was the only judge who hadn't laughed when my app crashed mid-demo. Her email was brief. Subject: coffee, body. Hey Liam. Saw the massive acquisition news. You built something incredible. If you're still in the city, I'd love to buy you a coffee and pick your brain. I met her 2 days later at a dim, quiet cafe near the financial district. I looked like hell bags under my eyes, unkempt beard, wearing a wrinkled hoodie. Elena took one look at me as I sat down and sighed. You look exhausted, Liam. You look like a guy who just found out his older brother is a corporate parasite. My head snapped up. You know? Elena leaned forward, folding her arms. Of course I know. Sterling and Croft just aggressively pitched their new scheduling platform to one of our incubator's seed investors last Thursday. One of my senior developers took one look at the UI wireframes and immediately recognized the underlying framework. It's TaskFlow Core's identical twin, just painted blue instead of green. Tell me you didn't license your code to them. I shook my head slowly. I didn't. Elena's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. Then it is time you remind your family exactly what kind of monster they are dealing with. That single conversation resurrected me. Elena offered me a private, secure office space at the incubator, entirely free of charge, for 6 months. She gave me direct access to a rotating roster of hungry, brilliant developers. You already built one massive success in the dark, she told me. Now, build something they can't ever touch. That night, I dug out an old, heavily encrypted hard drive. Inside were the foundational blueprints for a vastly superior platform I had dreamed up years ago, but lacked the capital to build. I called it Time's Apex Sync. Where TaskFlow Core helped small businesses manage basic schedules, Apex Sync would be an absolute juggernaut. It was a full-stack growth engine utilizing machine learning to automate complex quoting, dynamic routing, inventory management, and CRM analytics all in one flawless ecosystem. I started arriving at the incubator at 5 a.m. every single day. Elena introduced me to Maya, a front-end genius who could code responsive UI faster than I could speak, and Leo, a back-end architect who treated database optimization like a religious experience. The three of us clicked instantly. I poured a massive chunk of my own capital into the development. We lived on cold pizza, excessive espresso, and pure, unadulterated spite. 6 brutal months later, we quietly launched Apex Sync in a closed, invite-only private beta. We secured 10 mid-sized businesses. Then 50. Then 200. I intentionally avoided the press. No flashy launch parties, no PR stunts, just raw, undeniable results. By the end of our first quarter, a massive logistics company based out of Chicago published a glowing, unsolicited blog post detailing how Apex Sync had saved them $95,000 in operating costs in a single month by entirely automating their dispatch workflow. The tech world noticed. Investors started aggressively knocking on our door. But I kept the gates locked. I was waiting for Julian to make his fatal mistake. And then, my dad called me again. It was 8:15 p.m. on a Thursday. I stared at the caller ID, feeling a dark sense of anticipation. Hello, Liam, my dad said. His voice wasn't booming or authoritative this time. It sounded thin. Desperate. We need to talk. It's about Julian. I leaned back in my ergonomic desk chair, staring out at the city skyline. I'm listening. He's been reckless, my dad admitted, the words clearly tasting like ash in his mouth. He made astronomical promises to investors about this digital expansion. He took on massive pre-orders for the software, but the development team he hired can't make the back-end function. The code is collapsing under the weight of the user base. We are facing severe breach of contract lawsuits from 3 major clients. I remained dead silent. I let him drown in the quiet. Liam, please. My dad pleaded. This is our legacy. If we don't stabilize the tech division within 30 days, Sterling and Croft is looking at a catastrophic restructuring. We will have to lay off 50% of our real estate staff to cover the tech losses. We need a partner. We need someone with actual tech credibility to step in and fix the code. He was begging me to save the brother who robbed me. I'll think about it, Dad, I said coldly, and hung up. I didn't think about it. I knew exactly why Julian's software was failing. He had stolen my superficial blueprints, but he didn't understand the complex mathematical logic that held the architecture together. He had built a beautiful, hollow mansion on a foundation of quicksand, and now it was violently sinking. It was time to execute. Step 1. I needed undeniable proof of his product's catastrophic failure. I quietly tracked down a commercial contractor named Diego, who had been loudly complaining on LinkedIn about Sterling and Croft's broken software. I took Diego out for a beer. The app is absolute garbage. Man. Diego vented, slamming his glass down. It crashed 3 times in 1 week. I lost a $40,000 contracting gig because the app deleted my calendar sync. I emailed Julian's support team and got an automated reply saying they'd look into it in 5 to 7 business days. 5 days? In construction, that's a death sentence. I asked Diego if he would go on the record. He happily handed over his entire email chain with Julian, which included Julian frantically lying about server upgrades to cover up the broken code. Step 2. Cut off Julian's financial oxygen. I discovered through Elena that Julian was weeks away from closing a massive $5 million bailout loan from a venture capital firm to fix his software. I happened to know the junior partner at that firm, a woman named Chloe, from my college days. I sent her a secure message with a single attachment. A side-by-side technical teardown proving Julian's code was directly plagiarized from my old, outdated software, and that his current churn rate was over 80%. Chloe called me 5 minutes later. 3 days after that, the VC firm quietly pulled their entire $5 million term sheet. Julian was officially out of money, out of time, and out of excuses. Step 3. The public execution. Julian's 36th birthday was approaching, and my mother, oblivious to the impending corporate apocalypse, was throwing him a lavish surprise party. She rented out the grand ballroom at the Oak Ridge Country Club, the kind of pretentious establishment where members judge your worth by the brand of your watch. I wasn't officially invited by my parents, but my aunt, who had always secretly detested Julian's arrogance, slipped me an invitation. "You should come, Liam." She texted me, "Show them you aren't hiding in the shadows anymore." I formulated a beautiful, terrifying, flawless plan. The night of the party, I arrived exactly 20 minutes late. The ballroom was packed with over 100 guests. Chandeliers glittered, a jazz quartet played softly in the corner, and waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne. Julian stood near the front stage, wearing a custom velvet blazer, laughing entirely too loud. His girlfriend, a statuesque model who looked perpetually bored, clung to his arm. I slipped into the room unnoticed and immediately made my way to the AV booth in the back. The teenage sound technician was scrolling on his phone. I handed him a crisp $100 bill and a sleek black USB drive. The family wanted me to add a special surprise video to the birthday presentation. I lied smoothly. "Play this one immediately after the main highlight reel. Don't preview it. Just hit play." The kid pocketed the cash and nodded. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water and mingled near the back. Eventually, my dad spotted me. His forced smile instantly vanished. Then my mom saw me, her eyes darting nervously toward Julian. She didn't know why I was there, but she knew it wasn't to sing happy birthday. The MC, a local radio host Julian had hired, tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, tonight, we celebrate a man who isn't just a titan of real estate, but a true pioneer in the digital frontier. Let's take a look at the incredible journey of Julian Croft." The ballroom lights dimmed. The massive projector screen behind the stage flickered to life. A highly produced, nauseatingly arrogant video began playing. It showed Julian aggressively pointing at whiteboards, shaking hands with politicians, and standing in front of the stolen UI of his software. The crowd politely applauded. My dad beamed with pride. My mom wiped away a fake tear. As the video faded to black, the crowd began to cheer. But the lights didn't come back on. Suddenly, the screen flickered again. My USB drive engaged. The pristine corporate music was instantly replaced by the grainy, muffled audio of a cell phone recording from 4 years ago. The video filled the massive screen. It was me, sitting in my old, crappy apartment, physically pointing at a laptop screen, and sitting right next to me, looking intently at the code, was Julian. My voice echoed through the silent ballroom. "So, that's the core scheduling algorithm. It took me 6 months to write, but it prevents any double booking." Julian's voice, clear as day, responded from the speakers. "It's brilliant, Liam. Seriously. Hey, can I take a copy of these files on a hard drive? I want to show Dad how hard you've been working. Maybe we can get you some family funding." Me on the video. "Sure. Julian. Just please don't share the source code with anyone outside the house. It's not patented yet." Julian on the video, smiling his trademark lying smirk. "I promise. Bro. Your secret is safe with me." The video abruptly cut to a massive, high-definition, side-by-side comparison. On the left, my original code and marketing slogans from 4 years ago. On the right, Julian's current innovative software. It highlighted the exact plagiarized lines of code, the stolen UI assets, and the identically copied marketing copy. The final slide was a massive screenshot of Diego's email, showing Julian desperately lying about the broken software, followed by a giant red graphic that read, "Churn rate, 87%. Platform failure, imminent." The ballroom was plunged into a silence so profound, so absolute, that you could hear the ice melting in the cocktail glasses. I slowly walked down the center aisle, the eyes of 100 wealthy socialites tracking my every move. I stepped up onto the stage, directly next to my paralyzed brother. His jaw was literally hanging open. His girlfriend had physically dropped his arm and taken 2 steps away from him. My dad looked like he was going to vomit. My mom was staring at the floor, trembling. I calmly reached out, took the microphone from the frozen MC's hand, and looked directly into Julian's terrified, bloodshot eyes. "Happy 36th birthday, Julian," I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "I hope you kept the receipt for the code you stole, because it looks like it's completely defective." I dropped the microphone. It hit the wooden stage with a deafening screech of feedback. I turned my back on my family and walked out the grand double doors into the cool night air. Update 2. Julian didn't follow me out into the parking lot. He didn't scream. He just stood on that stage, utterly destroyed in front of everyone he spent his life trying to impress. I didn't sleep a single second that night. The adrenaline coursing through my veins felt like pure electricity. Every time I had swallowed my pride, every sarcastic jab I had endured, every moment I felt like a ghost in my own family, it all washed away. By 8 a.m. the next morning, the fallout was absolutely nuclear. Someone at the party, I still don't know who, but God bless them, had recorded the entire projector presentation on their phone. It was uploaded to Reddit and Twitter with the caption, "Arrogant real estate heir gets exposed by millionaire younger brother for stealing code at his own birthday party." It racked up 4 million views in 24 hours. By noon, I officially released my meticulously crafted press statement to every major tech publication in the country. I didn't write an emotional rant. I provided cold, hard, verifiable facts. I detailed the timeline of the IP theft, provided the undeniable proof, and formally announced that I would not be pursuing legal action, simply because Julian's stolen software was already collapsing under its own incompetence. I ended the press release with a single, devastating sentence. Liam Croft is currently the founder and CEO of Apex Inc., a revolutionary platform built entirely from scratch, without shortcuts, without intellectual theft, and absolutely without the financial backing of family. The internet completely eviscerated Julian. He was trending on Twitter for 2 days straight. The local business journal ran a front-page op-ed titled, "The Myth of the Golden Child: How Sterling and Croft Faked Their Way into Tech." Julian attempted to release a pathetic, PR-crafted apology statement on LinkedIn, claiming it was a private familial misunderstanding and that he had always meant to honor his brother's vision. The comment section tore him to shreds. One top comment read, "You didn't honor his vision, you colonized it and then crashed the ship. Enjoy bankruptcy, Nepo baby." Within 2 weeks, Sterling and Croft's digital division was entirely liquidated. They lost 3 major real estate contracts because clients no longer trusted their integrity. My dad was forced to quietly lay off 12 employees to cover the massive financial hole Julian had dug. Meanwhile, Apex Inc. exploded. The viral drama brought unprecedented attention to my new company. We closed our series of funding round at a staggering $15 million valuation. I brought Maya and Leo on as full-time equity partners. Elena joined our advisory board. My parents tried to contact me incessantly. I blocked their numbers, blocked their emails, and instructed the security desk at my new luxury high-rise to permanently ban them from the premises. 6 months later, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from my mom. I recognized her cursive handwriting. I opened it. She didn't apologize for the years of emotional abuse. She didn't apologize for Julian stealing my work. She just wrote a rambling paragraph about how Julian was deeply depressed, how Dad's blood pressure was dangerously high, and how family needs to stick together during hard times. I read the letter exactly once. Then, I walked over to my home office, fed it directly into the paper shredder, and watched it turn into confetti. The final, absolute victory came a year later. I was invited to give the keynote address at a massive national tech summit. I walked onto the stage wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans. No flash, no arrogance. I spoke for 45 minutes about the agonizing reality of building something from nothing, about the crushing weight of imposter syndrome, and about how sometimes, the people who share your DNA are the biggest obstacles to your success. The crowd gave me a standing ovation. As I walked off the stage, a prominent venture capitalist approached me, shook my hand, and smiled. "I used to do business with your brother," he said quietly. "He was always the loudest guy in the room, but you're quiet, and you build absolute earthquakes." I smiled back. I prefer tremors that don't ever stop. I didn't need my family's validation anymore. I didn't need their approval, their fake smiles, or their empty apologies. I built my own empire from the ashes of their disrespect. I didn't win because I fought back with lawyers or screaming matches. I won because I simply stopped asking them for permission to exist. And I let the sheer,
My twin
undeniable
arrived
weight
at
of
my
my
wedding in a
success
white
crushed them
dress,
into
claimed to be
silence.
me, and tried to interrupt. When I confronted her, she cried, "I'm saving you." I, a 24-year-old female, seek advice on my twin sister Avery, a 24-year-old female, and whether I made the right decision in entirely cutting her off. My family thinks I was overreacting, but I can't get over what she did. Avery and I are identical twins. Growing up, everyone constantly commented on how different we were, even though we looked identical. I was the quiet one who enjoyed literature and painting, whereas she was boisterous and popular. Our parents always made sure we had different identities, but Avery never seemed to be content with that. Throughout high school, Avery copied whatever I did. If I joined the drama club, she would also join. If I started dating someone, she would suddenly find them interesting. When I was accepted to art school with a scholarship, she enrolled to the same program, despite having no prior interest in painting. She was also admitted based on her grades rather than her talent. At art school, I met Ryan, a 26-year-old male. He was in my sculpture class, and we connected over our mutual passion of making things with our hands. Ryan was unlike anyone I'd dated before. He remained calm, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in my job and ambitions. We started dating during our second year. Avery disliked Ryan right away. She would comment on how uninteresting he was and how I should do better. She would interrupt our chats whenever he came over to our shared apartment. She even began flirting with him in front of me, making both Ryan and I uncomfortable. After graduation, Ryan and I relocated to Portland together. Avery remained in our hometown and secured a position at a marketing agency. I could finally breathe after years. I recognized how much Avery's continual presence had changed me. I began creating art that was completely mine, without fear of her copying or condemning it. Ryan proposed to me 6 months ago on a weekend vacation to the coast. It was perfect and private. Just the two of us watching the sunset. When I contacted Avery to deliver her the news, she remained silent for a long time. Then she asked if I was sure I wanted to marry someone this young. She claimed I was rushing into things, and Ryan most likely wanted to lock me up before I discovered I could do better. I dismissed her comments and asked her to be my maid of honor regardless. She agreed, but I could tell she was unhappy about it. The trouble began immediately. Avery preferred to plan everything her way. She chose a dress type she knew I disliked and claimed it would look better on both of us because we were twins. When I tried on several outfits, she threw a fuss and thought I was being difficult. She also suggested alterations to the guest list, venue, and menu. Every idea was the reverse of what Ryan and I want. When I urged her to stop, she explained that she was only trying to help make my wedding better. 3 months ago, Avery paid us a weekend visit to discuss wedding plans. Ryan was out of town for work, leaving just the two of us. I felt it would be good to spend time with my sister like we did as children. On Saturday night, we were discussing centerpiece alternatives when Avery abruptly stopped talking. She looked at me strangely and said she had something important to tell me. She explained that she had been thinking a lot about my engagement and decided she couldn't watch me make such a terrible mistake. She told me Ryan was not the appropriate person for me and that I was settling out of fear of being alone. I inquired what she meant, and she replied Ryan was uninteresting and lacked ambition. She pointed out that he was still working at the same woodworking shop he started directly after graduation, but others his age were climbing corporate ladders. She thought I was too talented and intelligent to be tied down to someone who would limit me. I told her Ryan enjoyed his work and was going to start his own furniture business soon. She laughed and claimed it confirmed her point about him lacking genuine ambition. Then she uttered something that made my blood turn cold. She informed me she had been studying Ryan online and discovered certain issues that troubled her. When I questioned what she meant, she explained that she had seen him eating lunch with a woman from his workplace several times. I immediately recognized who she was talking about. Julia was Ryan's co-worker and friend. She was married with 2 children, and Ryan had mentioned having lunch with her and other co-workers several times. I told Avery about it, but she shook her head and said it seemed like more than friendship to her. Avery took out her phone and showed me images she had shot of Ryan and Julia in a restaurant. They were plainly enjoying a typical lunch chat, but Avery zoomed in and cropped the images to make it appear more intimate than it actually was. I looked at the images and understood that Avery had driven 3 hours to Portland to spy on my fiancé. She had followed him around and took photographs without his knowledge. The level of forethought and duplicity was staggering. When I asked her why she would do this, she broke down in tears. She claimed she loved me too much to let me wreck my life. She persuaded me to call off the engagement, saying we could return home together and start over. That was then I realized what this was all about. Avery was unconcerned about my pleasure. She was angry that I had a life without her. She couldn't bear the fact that Ryan and I were creating something together that didn't include her. I told her she had to leave immediately. She began crying louder and stated I had chosen a man over my own sister. She said that we were intended to stay together forever, and that I was breaking up our family. I packed her suitcases as she sobbed on my couch. When I handed them to her, she grabbed my arm and declared she would not be my maid of honor if I continued to behave like this. I assured her that was all right because she was no longer invited to the wedding at all. She left that night, and I haven't spoken with her since. I blocked her phone number and social media profiles. The next day I received calls from my parents, aunts, and several relatives. Avery had contacted everyone and informed them that I had kicked her out for attempting to help me. She claimed I accused her of lying and chose Ryan over family. My mother contacted me crying, saying she couldn't believe I'd treat Avery like this. She claimed Avery was simply looking out for me and that cutting her off was excessive. My father was quieter, but agreed that I should try to resolve matters with Avery. My extended family has taken sides. Some say I overreacted, while others understand why I was furious. But the majority believe I should forgive Avery because she is my twin, and we have always been close. Ryan has been sympathetic, but I can sense he is stressed about the issue. He offered to speak with Avery directly, but I declined. I don't want her anywhere near him or our relationship. The wedding is in 2 months and I keep receiving texts from family members asking if Avery will go. When I answer no, they look at me as if I'm the villain in the story. I've started questioning myself. Maybe Avery was genuinely trying to help in her own misguided way. Perhaps I was too harsh by cutting her off entirely. But every time I think about those images and the preparation that went into taking them, I become irritated all over again. Am I wrong to terminate my friendship with my twin sister over this? Should I try to reconcile before to the wedding? Update 1. I had not expected my post to receive so much attention, so thank you to everyone who commented. The majority of you reinforced what I already knew deep inside, which helped me remain strong when things grew worse. Much has happened since I last updated. My mother called 2 weeks ago and asked if she could come visit to talk about Avery. I consented since I assumed she'd come to see my point of view. When she arrived, she had Avery with her. They plotted this ambush together, hoping to force me to reconcile. I opened my door and found both of them standing there with bags, and I almost shut it. My mother quickly explained that they just wanted to talk and that Avery had something important to tell me. Avery was in tears before she even stepped inside. I welcomed them in but told them they couldn't stay in my house. They could find a motel if they planned to stay for more than a few hours. Avery instantly apologized. She admitted she had overstepped and apologized for following Ryan around. She claimed she was afraid of losing me and behaved out of panic. But then she said something that made me know she still had no idea what she had done wrong. She expressed her desire that I could forgive her error so that we could move forward and plan the wedding together. I asked her what error she was referring to. She agreed shooting the images was wrong, but she maintained her concerns about Ryan. She still believed I was rushing into marriage and Ryan was not ambitious enough for me. My mother nodded, saying Avery had excellent concerns concerning Ryan. She explained that they both wanted what was best for me. I asked my mother if she had seen the photographs Avery had taken. She responded yes, and that while Avery should not have followed Ryan, the images did raise some concerns about his relationship with another lady. I couldn't believe what I heard. I took out my phone and dialed Ryan, putting him on speaker. I urged him to tell my mother and Avery about Julia. Ryan stated that Julia was a friend and co-worker who had helped him organize a surprise for me. They had been meeting to finalize specifications for a bespoke jewelry box he was creating for our anniversary. He explained that he had been careful not to mention it around me because he wanted it to be a surprise. Then Ryan said something that made my stomach sink. He inquired if this was about the private investigator, as Julia had said that someone had been questioning both of them at work. Avery's face turned white. When I asked her what Ryan was talking about, she started crying again. It found out Avery had done more than merely take images. She'd hired someone to research Ryan and had been looking for dirt on him for months. The investigator had called Ryan's co-workers, including Julia, and inquired about his conduct and relationships. Julia told her husband about it, and they were both concerned that someone was stalking them. I looked at Avery and inquired how far she had traveled. She admits to conducting background investigations on Ryan and even calling his ex-girlfriend from college to inquire about their connection. My mother attempted to defend Avery by claiming she was only being thorough because she cared about me. She stated it was wise to know who you were marrying. I told both of them to go immediately. Avery began pleading, saying she would stop investigating Ryan if I would simply listen to her concerns. My mother told me I was being unfair, and that Avery had spent a lot of money to protect me. I stated I didn't care how much money Avery had spent on her infatuation. I informed them that they had 1 hour to pack and leave, or I will contact the cops. Ryan returned home from work early after they had left. He was frightened by the phone call and wanted to make sure I was all right. We chatted for hours about what Avery had done, Ryan informed me that the investigator had contacted his supervisor and other clients, inquiring about his work quality and personal life. His employer had pulled him away to see if he was in any legal problems. Ryan had felt perplexed and humiliated, but hadn't connected it to Avery until now. We also called Julia and her husband to apologize and explain what had occurred. They were relieved to finally understand why someone had inquired about them, but they were also disappointed that they had been drawn into family conflict. The next day my father called me. He claimed my mother had told him everything, and he wanted to hear my side of the tale. My father remained silent for a long time after I told him about the private investigator and Ryan's co-workers' harassment. Finally, he denied knowing anything about it. He claimed my mother and Avery told him I was overreacting to some images, not that Avery hired someone to stalk my fiancé. My father apologized for not supporting me before. He claimed he would talk to my mother about Avery's behavior and attempt to explain why I was unhappy, but the harm had already been done. Our extended family had learned about the private investigator, and everyone was now taking sides. Some relatives believe Avery went too far, while others believe she was simply trying to protect her sister. My mother has called me every day, swinging between wrath and guilt. She claims I'm pulling the family apart and that Avery is distraught. She constantly urging me to let Avery attend the wedding as a regular guest. I've not changed my mind. Avery is not invited, and anyone who brings her as a +1 will be asked to leave. Ryan and I decided to hire security for the wedding after his boss informed us that the investigator had inquired about our wedding date and venue. We're concerned Avery will try to show there regardless. The worst aspect is that this entire issue has ruined what should have been a pleasant period in our lives. Instead of discussing our future together, we are coping with Avery's fixation and my family's problems. I keep thinking if I could have handled this differently. But every time I think about Avery hiring a private investigator, I realize I made the correct decision. Update 2. The wedding happened 3 weeks ago, and I need to tell you what happened since it was worse than I feared. Security was absolutely the right decision. Avery attempted to show there, not as a guest, but as someone claiming to be me. She had apparently planned this for some weeks. Avery arrived at the wedding location wearing a white dress that was identical to mine. She had received a copy of my dress design, most likely from my mother. She informed the security guy that she was the bride and that the guest list had been mixed up. Luckily, the security team was ready. They asked for her ID and promptly called me. I was getting dressed in the bridal suite when they informed me that someone claiming to be me was trying to enter. I peeked out the window and noticed her arguing with security. She had done her hair and cosmetics just like mine. From a distance, we appeared identical. It felt like witnessing a warped version of myself. The security team took Avery off the site, but she did not go quietly. She stood in the parking lot, yelling that I was making a horrible mistake and that Ryan would cheat on me. Several visitors arrived early and heard everything. My mother was already inside the venue, helping with last-minute preparations. When security told her what had transpired, she dashed outside to speak with Avery. They had a loud quarrel in the parking lot, which half of the wedding party witnessed. My mother rushed back inside crying and asked me to let Avery stay for the ceremony. She said Avery was upset and only wanted to see me get married. I told her no, and that if she continued to push, she may leave as well. Despite all of this, the ceremony was magnificent. Ryan and I were able to focus on each other and forget about the commotion outside, although I noticed other people gazing around nervously, probably wondering if Avery would return. The situation deteriorated during the reception. Avery had obviously been watching from across the street. When she noticed guests going for restroom breaks or to smoke, she approached a few. My cousin Nathan approached me during supper and told me that Avery had stopped him outdoors. She had informed him that Ryan was already cheating, and she had proof. She handed him printouts of text messages allegedly exchanged between Ryan and other women. Nathan stated that the messages appeared to be false, as if someone had produced them using screenshots. The phone numbers did not correspond to any of Ryan's devices, and several of the messages mentioned topics that made no sense. But Avery did not stop there. She had made phony social media profiles with images of ladies from Ryan's office and was sending herself messages pretending to be them. She then collected screenshots of these fictitious exchanges as evidence. Nathan told me this, and I understood Avery had completely lost contact with reality. She had expanded her investigation beyond Ryan. She was actively fabricating evidence to support her claim. Ryan and I decided to contact the police. Avery was harassing, and the fabricated evidence may be called fraud. We wanted to film everything in case the situation went further. The cops collected our statement and stated they will speak with Avery, They stated that showing up to the wedding in a bridal gown may be deemed impersonation, and fabricating proof was absolutely prohibited. 2 hours later, my phone began ringing with calls from family members. Avery had been arrested. She was accused with harassment and falsifying records. My mother was at the police station trying to bail her out. I should have stayed at my own wedding reception, but I felt compelled to go to the station and confront this situation head-on. Ryan accompanied me, and we met my parents there. My mother laughed so hard. She continued insisting it was all my fault for not forgiving Avery sooner. She stated that if I had simply included Avery at the wedding, none of this would have occurred. My father looked fatigued. He drew me aside and told me that he had no idea about the false texts until the cops described what Avery had done. He claimed Avery had lied to both of my parents about the scope of her conduct. When Avery was released on bond, she appeared dreadful. Her makeup was smudged and her clothing was crumpled. When she saw me, she burst into tears, apologizing and pleading for her sister to return. But then she said something that showed me she still didn't comprehend. She expressed her hope that now that I had witnessed how far Ryan would go to turn me against my family, I would finally listen to her concerns. I inquired what she meant. She claimed Ryan's call to the police demonstrated his controlling and vengeful nature. She claimed that a good man would have forgiven her mistakes and attempted to resolve the situation quietly. That's when I realized Avery would never change. Even after being jailed, she continued to make Ryan the villain in her fiction. I told Avery I didn't want to see her again. I threatened to file a restraining order if she approached me, Ryan, or anyone else in our lives again. My parents attempted to object, but I was done listening. Ryan and I returned to the venue to resume our celebration. Most of our guests knew what had happened, but they were supportive and attempted to help us salvage the evening. My father called me the next day to apologize. He stated that he was seeking for divorce from my mother. He couldn't stay married to someone who encouraged Avery's actions while blaming me for the repercussions. My mother has been phoning me non-stop since then, but I have not responded. She left voicemails stating, "I am destroying the family, and that Avery needs help, not punishment." Avery's court date is next month. Her lawyer contacted us and asked if we would consider dropping the charges if Avery agreed to stay away from us. We said no. Avery must face serious consequences for what she did. Update 3: Avery was sentenced to 6 months probation and obligatory treatment last week. She must also pay restitution for the expense of our wedding security, and will be unable to contact Ryan or myself for the next 2 years. However, it is not why I am writing this final update. Something happened that made me realize Avery's difficulties are far deeper than I previously imagined. 3 weeks ago I received a call from Lisa, Avery's college roommate. I hadn't communicated with Lisa since graduation, so I was surprised to hear from her. Lisa explained that she had heard of Avery's arrest through mutual acquaintances and wanted to tell me something important. She claimed she should have spoken up years ago but was frightened of becoming embroiled in family conflict. Lisa informed me that during college, Avery was preoccupied with emulating me in ways I had no idea about. She stated that Avery would browse through my social media profiles and copy my art creations before I posted them. Avery would turn in her copies first, making it appear that I was copying her. Avery had also started intercepting mail and items addressed to me in our shared apartment. She had opened acceptance letters from galleries and art competitions that I had submitted and discarded the ones that had received favorable feedback. Lisa explained that she tried to tell me about this during our senior year, but Avery persuaded her not to because I was already anxious about graduation and job seeking. But the worst thing was what Lisa said next. She claimed Avery had been undermining my relationships long before Ryan. In college, Avery would contact the guys I was dating and inform them that I was seeing other people or had said terrible things about them. Lisa showed me screenshots she had saved from years before. Avery had staged false text conversations that made it appear as if I was trash-talking my boyfriends to others. She had provided phony screenshots to the males I was dating, resulting in multiple breakups. I remembered those relationships ending abruptly, with men accusing me of things I had never said or done. At the time, I assumed they were immature or seeking for reasons to break up. I never suspected Avery was involved. Lisa apologized for not informing me sooner. She claimed she was young and afraid, that Avery had convinced her that she was protecting me from men who were not good enough. After meeting with Lisa, I began reaching out to other college classmates. 2 more of Avery's roommates confirmed similar accounts. Avery had been deliberately undermining my relationships and opportunities for years. I also discovered that Avery had been telling people we were going to start a business together after college. She had used my portfolio and artwork to apply for employment, stating that we were a creative partnership. When Avery failed to show up for interviews, several employers contacted me to inquire. Armed with this information, I decided to write to Avery's probation officer. I wanted them to understand that her behavior toward me and Ryan was part of a larger pattern of dishonesty and manipulation. The probation officer thanked me for the information, saying it would help Avery with his court-ordered counseling. They advised Avery to address these deeper concerns if she wanted to prevent more serious legal troubles in the future. My mother found out about the letter and called me yelling. She accused me of being vindictive and harsh by attempting to worsen Avery's punishment. She stated that Avery was sick and needed family assistance, not further legal issues. I told my mother that Avery had been actively ruining my life for years, and that I was done protecting her from the consequences. I said that if she wanted to help Avery, she could push her to accept responsibility for her actions rather than making excuses. My mother stated I was heartless, and she was embarrassed to name me her daughter. She claimed she would never forgive me for wrecking Avery's life. She then hung up on me. My father contacted me later that day. He admitted that he was unaware of Avery's undergraduate activities, but he was unsurprised. He stated he had always felt Avery had major mental health difficulties, but my mother had refused to seek professional treatment. He also informed me that my mother had been giving money to Avery while she was on probation, despite the court's order that she work and support herself. My mother had been lying to him about their finances to conceal these payments. My father stated that he had filed divorce papers and was leaving the family home. He stated he couldn't keep enabling Avery's conduct through my mother, and he was weary of being lied to. Ryan and I have been in couples counseling to get through all that has transpired. Our counselor informed us that we both have PTSD from Avery's harassment campaign, and that it will take time to totally trust that we are secure from her involvement. We also had to change our phone numbers and move to a new apartment because Avery had obtained our address and was mailing letters despite the restraining order. The letters were not threatening, but they were long, rambling apologies that demonstrated she still didn't know what she had done wrong. I have not spoken with my mother since our last phone talk. She attempted to contact me through relatives, but I begged them not to send along messages. I am not ready to be in a relationship with someone who believes I am the villain in this circumstance. Avery's probation officer phoned me last month, informing me that she had broken her probation by attempting to contact Ryan's workplace again. She called his supervisor pretending to be a client and inquired about Ryan's work schedule and personal life. Avery now faces jail time, rather than merely probation. Her lawyer requested us to testify on her behalf at the sentence, but we rejected. We have done everything we can to help Avery escape major repercussions, yet she continues to breach the court's rules. I know some people may think I'm being too severe by not assisting Avery at her sentencing, but I've learned that shielding Avery from repercussions simply allows her to continue harming others. Ryan and I plan to relocate to another state after his lease expires. We want to start again somewhere where Avery cannot find us. It seems severe, but we need to know we're entirely protected from her obsession. I never imagined I'd break off my twin sister forever, but Avery demonstrated that being family does not give someone the right to ruin your life. Some relationships, especially those involving individuals you care about, are too poisonous to heal. For anyone in a similar circumstance, believe your intuition about poisonous family members. You do not have to give anyone access to your life simply because you share DNA. Walking away from a situation is sometimes the most considerate thing you can do for everyone. Now let us go to the following narrative. Story 2. I struggled with infertility for 7 years. When I eventually became pregnant, my brother accused me of selfishness. Now he shows up intoxicated at my house, asking to see my newborn. I, 34, never imagined myself in this situation, divided between my lifelong desire of becoming a mother and my connection with my older brother, Nathan, 38. Growing up, Nathan and I were inseparable. He was my defender, confidant, and closest friend. We come from a close-knit family, and our parents constantly emphasized the value of sibling relationships. Nathan was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with my homework, and chased off the boys who tried to bully me in middle school. Our friendship grew stronger with age. Nathan was suspicious when I met my husband, Kevin, a 35-year-old male in college. He interrogated Kevin mercilessly during our first family dinner, inquiring about his ambitions and future plans. However, Nathan eventually came to consider Kevin as the brother he never had. They bonded over their mutual love of football and horrible dad jokes. Nathan was even Kevin's best man in our wedding 10 years ago. Everything changed when Kevin and I began trying for a baby 7 years ago. We were so happy and naive back then, assuming everything would happen swiftly. But month after month, we were disappointed. We initially kept it to ourselves, not wanting to concern our families. But as time passed and the difficulties became more evident, we opened up about our fertility problems. Nathan's wife, Julia, 36, became pregnant with their first child about the same time we began trying. I was truly delighted for them, but it was difficult to watch them start a family so easily while we battled. Nathan, who had always been my support, now appeared aloof and uncomfortable around me. He would dodge the issue of babies entirely, or make awkward jokes about how we needed to work harder. As our reproductive journey progressed, we had several rounds of IVF. Each setback was painful, but we tried to maintain optimism. During this time, Nathan and Julia had 2 additional children quickly. While I enjoyed being an aunt, each pregnancy announcement and baby shower seemed like a stab in my heart. Nathan's actions at this time were perplexing and hurtful. He appeared to alternate between completely shunning me and making offensive comments. After a particularly painful failed IVF round, he suggested to me during a family meal that I stop thinking about having a baby and instead pursue a hobby. I was astonished and upset, but I attempted to dismiss it, telling myself he simply didn't understand. 2 years ago, after our previous failed IVF treatment, our doctor advised us that our chances of conceiving were extremely slim. I was crushed. I slipped into a severe despair and scarcely left the house for weeks. Kevin was my rock during this time, but I could see how it was affecting him as well. Nathan's insensitivity peaked throughout this gloomy period. He'd often say things like, "Just relax, it'll happen when you stop trying so hard," or, "Maybe you're not meant to be a mom." Each word felt like a knife coming from my brother, who had once been my staunchest advocate. The matter reached a climax at our parents' 40th anniversary party last year. I had just learned that our last IVF round had failed, and I was feeling especially raw and vulnerable. I attempted to put on a brave face for our parents' sake, but my anguish was clearly obvious. Nathan cornered me in the kitchen as I was getting a glass of water. He began lecturing me on how I should get over it and stop being so selfish. He told me that my mopey attitude was destroying family gatherings, and that instead of wallowing in self-pity, I should be happy for him and Julia. He also implied that my fixation with having a baby was straining his relationship with Kevin. I was stunned. This was not the brother I knew or loved. I attempted to convey how cruel his words were, how the sorrow of infertility was not something I could simply get over. But he only became angrier, accusing me of being jealous of his children and trying to make everything about myself. Kevin came to check on me after the debate became heated. When he saw what was going on, he intervened, telling Nathan to back off and stop being so cruel. Nathan stormed out, furious. Kevin and I left the party early, disturbed by what had happened. Nathan and I have had a difficult relationship ever since. At family gatherings, he rarely speaks to me, and when he does, it is usually to make sarcastic remarks. Our parents attempted to mediate by hosting family dinners and encouraged us to speak things out. But Nathan refuses to admit he'd done anything wrong. He insists that I am overreacting and should mature. This schism has altered the entire family dynamic. Sophie, our younger sister, 30 female, feels trapped in the middle, attempting to maintain ties with both of us without taking sides. Our parents are anxious and upset by the dispute, frequently recalling the close relationship Nathan and I formerly had. Last month, something unexpected occurred. I began feeling nauseated and fatigued all the time. At first, I disregarded it as stress caused by continuing family strife and my hard profession as a high school teacher. However, after a few weeks when the symptoms did not improve, I decided to see my doctor. She informed me that I was roughly 12 weeks pregnant, which really surprised me. Kevin and I were ecstatic but yet apprehensive, considering our history. We opted to keep the news hidden until we were further along, not wanting to raise our hopes or cope with family reactions right away. However, over a family dinner last week, our mother noted that I wasn't drinking wine, which was unusual for me. She guessed quickly and was overjoyed. In her excitement, she began informing everyone at the table, including Nathan and Julia. Nathan's reply did not meet my expectations. Instead of being pleased for us, he accused me of stealing his thunder. Julia is reportedly pregnant with their 4th child, and they intend to announce it at the next family gathering. He felt it was selfish of me to become pregnant now since his children were old enough to enjoy having a newborn cousin. I felt hurt and enraged. This felt like the final nail in the coffin after years of insensitivity and harsh comments regarding our fertility issues. Kevin, my constant defender, informed Nathan that his actions were wrong and that if he couldn't be pleased for us, he should keep his feelings to himself. The evening ended in pandemonium, with Nathan and Julia leaving abruptly and our parents attempting to calm things down. Since then, Kevin and I have agreed to minimize our contact with Nathan and Julia during my pregnancy. We do not want any more stress at this high-risk period. Some family members, particularly our sister Sophie and our uncle Victor, 58, believe we are overreacting. They suggest we shouldn't give up our relationship with Nathan over this. That family is extremely essential. But I believe this is simply the culmination of years of cruel behavior. Is it terrible that I want to distance myself from my brother during what should be one of the best periods of my life? How can I strike a balance between my want to safeguard my mental health and pregnancy, and the need to maintain family harmony? I never imagined I'd have to choose between my brother and my own well-being, yet here I am, feeling lost and divided. Update 1. It's been approximately 2 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. I'm 20 weeks pregnant, and we just found out we're having a girl. Kevin and I are overjoyed, but Nathan's position has deteriorated more. After we revealed our plan to limit contact, Nathan went on a rampage. He began calling our parents, Sophie and other relatives, claiming that we were being dramatic and selfish. He even went on a huge Facebook rant about how family should always come first, and how heartbroken he was that we were pushing him away without reason. Our parents were originally torn. They've always been peacemakers, and the prospect of their children fighting is distressing for them. Mom would contact me virtually every day, tearfully imploring for us to sort things out. Dad, who is normally more stoic, appeared disoriented and unsure how to handle the situation. They wanted everyone to get along and couldn't understand why we couldn't simply talk it out. But then something unexpected occurred. Our 32-year-old female relative Maya contacted me privately. Maya and I were close as children, but we grew apart as she traveled across the nation for work. She told me she had been following the family drama from a distance and felt driven to share her own experience with Nathan. Maya apparently suffered a miscarriage 2 years ago. She had been about 10 weeks pregnant and was horrified. She had confided in Nathan during a rare visit home, and he had been equally insensitive. According to Maya, he encouraged her to get over it because the baby wasn't even born yet. He argued she was overreacting and should be thankful it happened early rather than later in the pregnancy. Maya's story stunned me. It was like a missing puzzle piece fell into fit, revealing a pattern of conduct I hadn't previously noticed. It also gave me the strength to tell our parents about Nathan's harsh words and actions over the years. I showed them text conversations in which he insulted our fertility issues and rejected our pain. I described situations at family gatherings in which he made offensive remarks or jokes about us. Our parents were startled. They had no knowledge of Nathan's actions. Mom burst into tears, apologizing for not realizing what was happening, and for forcing us to reconcile. Dad, who has always been a man of few words, merely stated that he was disappointed in Nathan and understood our need for distance. This discovery altered the family dynamic substantially. Our parents stopped urging us to make amends with Nathan and began setting their own boundaries. They informed Nathan that his behavior was inappropriate and that he needed to apologize and make apologies if he wanted to fully participate in family functions. Nathan didn't take it well. He accused me of inciting the family against him and manipulating our parents. He began sending angry letters to everyone, accusing us of conspiring against him and Julia. Last weekend, at a family BBQ, things became heated. It was meant to be a small party to commemorate Sophie's recent promotion at work. Kevin and I had declined to attend because we knew Nathan and Julia would be present. However, midway through the event, Sophie gave us a frantic call. Nathan apparently arrived in a nasty attitude, having already consumed a few drinks. He immediately began making passive-aggressive remarks about how some individuals believe they are too good for family. When Sophie ordered him to stop, he became louder and more obnoxious, complaining about how unfair everyone was to him. Kevin and I decided to go over and try to defuse the situation. When we arrived, the anxiety was evident. Nathan, red-faced and slurring slightly, quickly focused on us. He began throwing accusations, claiming that we were pulling the family apart and that we were greedy for hogging all the attention with our pregnancy. Kevin tried to calm him down, speaking in a low, soothing tone, and asking Nathan to consider the anguish he was causing. But Nathan was beyond reason. He got in Kevin's face, poked his chest, and asked if he wanted to take it outside. That's when our father stepped in. I've never seen him this angry. He physically positioned himself between Nathan and Kevin, telling Nathan that his behavior was inappropriate, and that if he couldn't be supportive, he should leave. Nathan was stunned. He tried to disagree, but our mother stood by Dad, stating Nathan's activities were harming everyone and that he needed to step back and reflect on his behavior. Nathan and Julia drove away in a fury, with Nathan yelling that we'd regret this. The rest of us were left terrified, with the BBQ effectively wrecked. Sophie was in tears, feeling guilty about organizing the event in the first place. Our parents were older than I had ever seen them, worn out by the battle. Since then, Nathan has been sending angry texts to everyone, saying that we have turned the family against him. He's been posting vague, angry posts on social media, prompting worrisome responses from extended relatives and old acquaintances who don't know the whole situation. Most relatives are ignoring him, but a few, like our Aunt Caroline, 55 female, and Uncle Victor, continue to pressure us to reunite for the sake of family harmony. They keep talking about how we'll regret this schism once our parents are gone, and how family should always come first. But Kevin and I are standing firm. We've opted to focus on getting ready for our daughter's arrival and surround ourselves with good, helpful people. We've started taking childbirth classes and have been busy preparing the nursery. Kevin's parents, who live a few hours away, have been incredibly helpful, frequently driving up on weekends to assist and provide emotional support. It's unfortunate that Nathan will not be able to join us during this joyful period of our lives. There are times when I miss the brother I once had. The one who protected me and made me laugh. But then I remember all of the misery he has caused, and I know we are making the correct decision for our mental health and our baby's well-being. As my due date approaches, I'm trying to focus on the joy of being a mother rather than the family drama. But it's difficult not to wonder what the future holds. Will Nathan ever comprehend the pain he has caused? Will our family ever be able to mend from this rift? Only time will tell. Update 2. Another several months have passed, and I am now 32 weeks pregnant. The situation with Nathan has taken an unexpected turn, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. Last month, Julia texted me and asked if we might meet for coffee. Given what had happened, I was cautious, but my curiosity won out. We met at a quiet cafe near my house, and Julia's words left me reeling. She began by apologizing for not confronting Nathan's actions throughout the years. She said that things in their marriage had not been going well for a long time, even before the recent turmoil. Nathan's insensitivity appears to extend beyond family members who are suffering with fertility. He has been dismissive of Julia's issues with postpartum depression since their last child, and has been spending more and more time away from home. Julia revealed that she has been pondering leaving Nathan. She stated that watching Kevin support me made her realize how unhealthy her own relationship is. She informed me about situations I was unaware of, such as Nathan mocking her professional goals, rejecting her fears about their children, and even flirting with other women at parties. I was sympathetic, but apprehensive. While I accepted her apologies and felt terrible for her position, I made it plain that it did not erase years of pain. I suggested that she speak with a therapist or counselor to sort through her emotions and determine her next actions. After our meeting, I felt conflicted. Part of me felt vindicated that someone else recognized Nathan's behavior for what it was, while another part of me was saddened by the degradation of a once strong friendship. Nathan unexpectedly arrived at our house a week after Julia's confession. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Kevin and I were putting together the crib for the nursery. Nathan looked terrible. Unshaven, with big circles under his eyes that indicated he hadn't slept in days. He burst out screaming almost immediately, stating Julia had abandoned him and taken the kids to her parents' place. Between sobbing, he told us that Julia had given him an ultimatum: either receive assistance for his anger and drinking issues, or she will file divorce. Nathan requested us to help him resolve issues with Julia and the rest of the family. He admitted he had been a horrible jerk and wanted to make amends. He even got down on his knees, pleading with me to contact Julia on his behalf. I felt conflicted. Part of me felt bad for him. This broken man was so unlike the strong, protective older brother I previously knew. But a greater part of me was still upset at how he had treated us and suspicious of his sudden change of heart. Kevin and I exchanged a look, silently communicating as we frequently do. Then, as gently as possible, we told Nathan that, while we were sorry he was going through a difficult time, we couldn't help him. We advised him to seek professional help to resolve his troubles, both for his own and his family's sake. Nathan didn't take it well. His sorrow immediately turned to rage. He accused us of being callous, claiming we were kicking him while he was down. He stated that he could not believe his own sister would desert him in his time of need. Then he stormed out, slamming our front door so fiercely that the portraits rattled against the walls. We haven't heard from Nathan directly since then, but the family gossip has been rife. Our parents called the next day to inform us that Nathan had arrived at their home in a similar state. They're trying to persuade him to go to therapy, but he's not interested. Sophie contacted me in tears, explaining that Nathan had been leaving her rambling, sometimes incomprehensible voicemails. She is concerned about his mental health, but she is unsure how to help. I urged her to retain her distance for now, and to encourage Nathan to seek professional help if he contacted her again. The entire incident has elicited a range of complex emotions. While I don't want to see my brother suffer, I also don't feel ready to welcome him back into my life, especially with the kid on the way. His explosive behavior is troubling, and I'm concerned about the stress it may bring for me and the baby. Continuing from where we left off, Kevin and I are attempting to focus on the final preparations for our daughter's arrival, but the family drama is obviously putting a pall over what should be a joyous occasion. We've finished putting up the nursery, a serene space painted in subtle yellows and greens. Kevin's mother assisted us in decorating, and it has quickly become my favorite room in the house. Sometimes I sit in the rocking chair, caressing my belly and chatting to our little girl, trying to distract myself from the family drama. We've started going to childbirth classes twice a week. The other expectant parents have formed a type of support network. It's wonderful to be around people who don't know about our family problems and simply see us as a happy couple expecting their first kid. Despite everything, I'm trying to have a positive attitude and concentrate on the wonder that is growing inside of me. After years of believing it would never happen, each kick and movement seems like a priceless gift. Kevin has been my rock throughout this, attending every doctor's visit, satisfying my midnight desires, and knowing when I need a hug or a listening ear. As my due date approaches, I can't help but ponder about the future. Will Nathan get the help he requires? Will our family ever be able to mend from this rift? Only time will tell. Update 3. Our beautiful daughter, Lily, was born 3 weeks ago. The birth was difficult. I needed an emergency C-section after 20 hours of labor, but Lily and I are doing well now. The instant they placed her in my arms, all of the sorrow and hardship of the previous year seemed to vanish. Kevin has been an amazing rock through everything, seldom leaving our side during our hospital stay. Coming home with Lily has been a roller coaster of emotions. We're fatigued, but utterly smitten with our little child. The nights are long, and the days are full of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen naps. But every time Lily wraps her tiny fingers around my finger, or Kevin makes her smile, my heart feels like it will burst with joy. Unfortunately, the drama with Nathan has not faded. He did not contact us when Lily was born, despite our parents informing him. They said he has been asking about her, but he is furious because we did not tell him about the birth ourselves. It's frustrating because it appears that he's making Lily's birth about him rather than celebrating her new life. Our parents and Sophie have been to see Lily several times, and they adore her. It's bittersweet to watch them with her, knowing that in another universe, Nathan and his family would also be there. Sophie revealed that Nathan's children have been asking about their new cousin, wondering why they haven't met her yet. Julia called us again last week. She and the children are still living with her parents, and she has initiated divorce proceedings. Nathan evidently refused to get therapy or admit his problems, leaving her with no choice. She asked whether we would be willing to write a statement on Nathan's behavior throughout the years, which could be significant to their custody arrangements. Kevin and I are still deciding whether or not to become involved. On the one hand, we want to encourage Julia while also ensuring the children's health. On the other hand, we're concerned about getting drawn into legal processes and potentially worsening our issue with Nathan. The most recent development occurred yesterday, and it has left us shaken. Nathan arrived at our place in the evening, definitely wasted. He began hammering on the door, yelling about how we had ruined his life and demanding to see his niece. Lily was sleeping when his ranting woke her up, causing her to wail. Kevin managed to calm Nathan down and get him to go without incident, but it was frightening. The notion of Nathan's unpredictable conduct around our newborn daughter is unsettling. We're really considering getting a restraining order, which I never expected to have to do against my own brother. This entire issue has shown me how toxic Nathan's presence in our lives has been. While I hope he gets the care he requires, my current concern is to safeguard my daughter and our small family. We're thinking of relocating to a new house in a different neighborhood, partially to give Lily more space as she develops, but also to get away from all the turmoil. We've also begun to discuss the prospect of family therapy, not necessarily with Nathan right now, but potentially with our parents and Sophie. There's a lot of hurt and confusion to get through, and we believe that having a neutral third party may help us manage these complex emotions and familial dynamics. Despite everything, the last few weeks with Lily have been the happiest of my life. Kevin and I are fatigued but incredibly smitten with our little child. We're focusing on enjoying this precious time and creating a positive, loving atmosphere for our baby. Every day, I gaze at Lily and feel grateful for the difficult route that led her to us. While Nathan's situation has been heartbreaking, it has also increased my appreciation for the healthy, supportive relationships in my life. As we move forward, our objective is to surround Lily with love, positivity, and strong, healthy family bonds, whatever that family looks like. My parents never visited me in the ICU. Instead, they plotted to take guardianship. I stayed silent and made them call me in desperation. Later. For weeks I had an uneasy sense that something was wrong, but I ignored it as I always did. It wasn't the first time I ignored warning indications: headaches, dizziness, and an occasional tightness in my chest. Because the reality is, I didn't believe I could afford to slow down. Not while I was helping my mother with her vehicle payment and my sister Nora was texting me every 2 days, asking for a fast loan. And certainly not when my father continued to blame me for his delayed mortgage payment. That is the part that folks do not understand. They see the photo-perfect family posts and assume everything is good. They don't understand what it's like to grow up as the only son in a family where you're constantly the background character. My sisters Nora and Clara might smash a car and still be commended for learning something important. I once won a statewide engineering prize, and my mother's sole comment was, "Oh, cool. Did you thank your teacher?" I no longer wanted attention. I simply wanted something back. Perhaps a sliver of thankfulness. But it wasn't in the cards. So I worked. I worked through the weekends. I paid bills that I shouldn't have. And I assured myself everything was good until that Monday afternoon. I was at my desk, almost halfway through preparing a presentation for a key customer. I recall standing up to get a folder from the printer, and then seeing nothing but black. I awoke to beeps, frigid lights, wires attached to my chest, and a nurse changing a drip. It felt weird, like something out of a movie. But it was genuine, and it was not a panic attack, dehydration, or tiredness. It was a full-blown cardiac episode. The doctor indicated it may have been worse if I hadn't collapsed straight in the office. Someone contacted 911 right away. My coworkers were the reason I could still breathe. The hospital personnel was great, courteous and competent, and when they noticed I didn't have anyone at my bedside hours later, they informed me that they had already phoned my emergency contacts, my parents. I waited. I waited for 2 days. Nothing. No texts, visits, or phone calls. Then, on the third day, I awoke after a nap and checked my phone, assuming the signal had vanished. There was simply one notification. A tag on Instagram. Nora sent us a photo of her, Clara, and our parents seated around a picnic table at the lake, all smiling. My mother had even prepared her specialty deviled eggs. The caption hit me more than the fall ever had. Family day without drama. And yeah, they tagged me like if I were an inside joke, as if I wasn't half dead in a hospital bed while they were giggling about potato salad. I did not respond. I stared at the screen till it faded. Something cracked within me that day. Not in a loud, aggressive tone, but in a calm, definitive manner. Like a door closing with no intention of ever reopening. I kept recuperating slowly. The physicians were monitoring my heart and performing tests. I rarely spoke unless I had to. And still, no word from my family until 4 days later. I awoke to 74 missed calls and a text from my father. "We need you. Respond immediately. No apologies. There is no, 'How are you?' Just those words." I'm not sure what I expected, but I didn't hesitate. I sat up, still weak and attached to machines, and without hesitation dialed back, but not to them. I phoned someone else. I stared at my father's text for about a minute. "We need you. Respond immediately." It's been 4 days without a word. 74 missed calls, but that was what they started with. Not, "How are you?" or, "Are you okay?" I didn't panic. I felt nothing. Just a dead quiet that replaced whatever feeling used to arise during such moments. I then remembered a number. I hadn't used this number in a long time. One I had preserved with a name I never deleted. Gramps. I had not called him in months. Not because we weren't close, but because I knew how he felt about the rest of the family, and was too humiliated to say he was correct again. But, that morning, I called him. He picked up on the second ring as if he had been waiting. They didn't inquire how I was doing. I just asked which hospital. That was it. There was no hesitancy, no questioning, no passive-aggressive silence, simply a quick reaction that made me feel important. That was something I had not felt in years. He arrived 40 minutes later. He looked exactly the same old windbreaker. He'd been wearing the same watch since I was a kid. Same expression on his face, as if nothing startled him anymore, but he was always prepared. He went in, sat down, looked at me and said, "So they finally broke you too, huh?" I didn't even question how he knew. I just nodded. He stayed with me all day, spoke with my nurse, asked probing questions, and discreetly paid for one of the tests that my insurance denied without making a fuss. Then he took out a tablet and began guiding me through the disaster I had left on autopilot. We went through everything. My name appeared on 5 distinct loan agreements, 3 credit cards, 2 utilities, and a car insurance policy for a vehicle I never drove. It was all so ingrained in my routine that I didn't recognize how awful things had gotten. Every time they hit a difficult patch, I stepped in softly and automatically, since I assumed that was what family meant. Fixing the flaws without asking anything in return. But they expected me to do it. When I didn't or couldn't, I became the issue. The drama. I was beginning to realize they hadn't simply relied on me. They had leaned through me. I was not even a person to them. I was a pressure valve, a cash dispenser, a family failing on whom they could rely, as long as I didn't remind them of what they owed me in exchange. Gramps helped me create a list of every account and connection. Then we turned them off, one by one. I canceled the automatic deposit to Nora's checking account. She used to say she was barely scraping by, yet she'd flown to Miami 3 times this year and posted about each trip. She could now pay her own bills. Clara's rent deposit is gone. My mother's automobile insurance. She could call the provider herself. I withdrew my card information and updated my password, and I reported the loan I co-signed for Nora, which she had conveniently avoided discussing for months. I also filed a fraud report. Not because I intended to ruin her, but because I never pledged to be her backup plan indefinitely. I was done signing agreements for folks who refused to show up for me on a hospital bed. Gramps didn't say much, but every now and again he would say something softly, as if he was both disappointed and unsurprised. He was the only person who had ever told me the truth. Loyalty is only as strong as the people you are loyal to. By the time he departed that evening, the number of calls had doubled. My phone needed to be hushed. Mom had left voicemails, claiming she had just heard what had transpired. Clara was texting in all uppercase, expecting me to react quickly. Nora had gone quiet, which meant she was planning something worse. Then another note arrived from Dad. This is serious. Call me right now. Everything is coming apart. There's still no mention of the hospital. Not a single word regarding what occurred to me. Just panic. Not for me, but because they knew what was about to happen. The first domino had fallen. They simply didn't recognize I was the one who pushed it. I was still in the hospital when the fallout began. At first, it was the voicemail. 12, 24, and eventually so many that I lost counting. I played one on speaker to see what had changed. It was my mother. The tone she used was, "I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this isn't the way to do it." Not dread or concern, just frustration since the ATM was faulty. Nora followed up with a text. Initially there were no words, only a screenshot of her checking account. The balance was $29. Then she said, "What the hell is going on? Fix this." I glanced at the screen, felt my wrath rise for a moment, and then let it go. It wasn't new. It was simply louder now. Clara attempted a fresh angle. Her text was lengthier and more heartfelt. She stated she had no idea what was going on, and that she loved all of us and wished for peace. She closed it with, "Please don't punish me for things I didn't do," which was amusing given that the last time we spoke, she rolled her eyes when I informed her I couldn't co-sign another lease. Said I was being tough, then ignored me for 3 months. But it was my father who eventually crossed the line. He showed up to my apartment. Gramps warned me. He had noticed his automobile outside earlier, idling. I was still recovering, and not strong enough to walk without assistance. However, this did not prevent him from parking outside as if he were waiting for a captive to be released. I did not respond. Later that day, a text arrived. "You are ready to destroy everything we have built. I hope you realize the harm you're causing. Everything we built." The arrogance in that sentence made me laugh aloud. I read it again to ensure that I hadn't dreamed it. No apology, no mention of the hospital, and no concern for what had brought me there in the first place. It's just fear. They were afraid of losing their leverage, which they had accumulated over time. Then came the post. Nora uploaded a video. There was no music or voice, just a slow, dramatic walkthrough of my parents' absolutely vacant house. Not just cleared out, but kind of vacant. We were evicted with nothing. Front door is wide open. The living room was stripped. The dining table is gone. Even the drapes had been pulled down. The caption stated, "They took everything. Can you identify who let them?" I watched it once, then went onto my finance app and looked up the mortgage. It had defaulted again. They'd use the equity to pay off Nora's credit card debt and fund Clara's internet business idea. I'm not sure if it was a candle firm or a clothing boutique. It failed within 2 months. None of the funds had gone toward the mortgage. I warned them just once last year that if they didn't improve, I'd go. They did not believe me. So while I walked, the bank moved in. Gramps was present when I found the paperwork. I didn't say anything at first, simply scanned through the debt, late fines, and notices that I had never seen, because they had been delivered directly to my parents' address. He nodded once. Then he placed a couple calls. One to his lawyer, another to an old buddy in estate planning, and finally to his accountant, whom I had no idea existed until that day. What I learned next clarified everything. My family hadn't simply relied on me. They'd also been quietly probing about my granddad, especially after he retired. Clara had taken him to brunch twice, which was something she never did. Last year, Nora gave him a Christmas gift for the first time in a decade. Mom suggested during one of their phone chats that he start thinking about what's fair. He saw it all coming and had planned accordingly. Every asset, trust, and property he owned had already been relocated, not to punish them, but to safeguard it from them. And now he's renamed most of it mine. Not as a present or as a reward, but because I was the only one who hadn't requested it. I had demonstrated severely and unequivocally that I could manage without it, and that I did not feel entitled to a penny. In his words, that made me the only one deserving of it. That night, Nora arrived at the hospital. She was not on the list, so security did not let her in, but I could see her through the window. She was pacing the lot, phone in hand, and evidently talking to someone, most likely Clara. She was wearing sunglasses even though it was growing dark, as if she was preparing for a confrontation that never happened. She departed after 15 minutes. I thought that was the end of it. A final communication arrived an hour later. I vow to God that you will be sorry if you do not repair this. There are no emojis, hearts, or hashtags, just that text. And it did not hit her in the way she expected. I did not feel intimidated, scared, or cornered. For the first time I felt nothing. I'd quit trying to be the son, brother, or fixer. Now I was free. It began with a knock on the hospital room door. I figured it was a nurse, it was not. A staff worker stepped in, slightly uneasy, and said, "There's a woman downstairs claiming to be your medical proxy. She says she's your sister, and needs to speak with your doctor right away." I looked at her, puzzled at first. I hadn't identified anyone in my immediate family as an emergency contact. Only my grandfather. I asked who it was. She checked the notes. Clara. I nearly laughed. She hadn't texted me in days, hadn't paid me a visit, and hadn't even noticed my hospitalization until I cut off her rent help. And now she was attempting to speak for me. I informed them that no one was authorized. The hospital agreed and had security escort her away, preventing her from entering my room. I assumed she was just being dramatic. I was mistaken. A few hours later, Gramps stepped in with a manila envelope. He sat down after dropping it on the bed. Inside there were printed screenshots of an email exchange between my parents and a small law firm I had never heard of. They were looking into formal guardianship, expressly for me. I read it 3 times to be sure I understood. They were attempting to imply that I was ill, psychologically unstable, erratic, possibly suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder or breakdown, and that my previous financial actions demonstrated a pattern of emotional instability. Their purpose was clear. If they could designate someone, preferably my father, as a temporary conservator, they could halt the financial reversals I'd already initiated. Restore access to accounts, re-establish credit, and restore control. They were trying to portray me as incompetent. These are the same individuals that didn't even check to see whether I was still alive 4 days earlier. I sat with it for a while. Gramps remained calm. He assured me that this was not new to him. Years ago, when my uncle attempted to leave the family for identical reasons, my parents discussed the notion as well. It never went anywhere. But now, with real money at risk, they were willing to try. They didn't call because they cared. They called because they were besieged. I stayed silent the remainder of the day. Not in a sad sense, but in a concentrated way. Something inside me clicked. I'd spent my entire life hoping they'd wake up, realize how much I'd given, and perhaps even apologize. However, they were not waking up. They were trying to change the story so that I was the villain. So I created a list. Every account, shared asset, every payment I'd set up to help over the years. My lawyer, whom Gramps referred me to, arrived that evening with documentation already in hand. The following morning we filed a cease and desist letter to both my sisters and parents, prohibiting them from contacting any of my doctors or impersonating medical proxies. Every bank institution to which I had ever given access with a family member was under fraud watch. A restraining order on property transfers in my name. If somebody attempted to sell or transfer an asset for which I had co-signed, a legal freeze would be triggered. I also had my HR department transfer all direct deposits to a new bank, one they had no idea existed, through a holding trust established by my grandfather's estate advisor. It was the first time in my life that I felt safe. Then the next hit arrived. Clara shared a video. Her makeup was dirty, the lighting was poor, and the camera shook just enough to appear raw. It began with her sniffling and concluded with her staring directly into the lens. She did not mention my name, but she spoke enough. There's someone in our family who's going through something dark. We're trying to help him, but he's lashing out and hurting people. We don't want to lose him, but we also can't keep letting him destroy everything we've built. Everything we have built. It was the same statement repeated, as if I had just walked into their empire and turned off the lights. The video took off quickly. Her pals began commenting. Cousins I hadn't communicated with in years sent strange texts. Even one of my old co-workers contacted me to see whether everything was all right. Nora shared it, adding a heart emoji and the words, "We're all praying for peace. Peace." After attempting to seize control of my life, money and health, they were not praying for peace. They were hoping I would fold. But I did not. Instead I shared something of my own. Just one photo. I'm sitting up in the hospital bed next to my grandfather. Nothing spectacular, no lengthy caption, just this. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's restraint. No hashtags, no tags, and no drama. But I was confident it would come back to them, and it did. 2 hours later, Nora called. I didn't respond. She called again, then Clara, and then my mother. All missed calls. My father then sent me a final text message. We didn't want it to come to this. You are compelling us to do things we would never want to do. They still didn't understand it. They still believed they were in control, but they had no idea what would happen next. The letter arrived 2 days later, hand-delivered to the hospital and sealed in a crisp white envelope. I opened it, thinking they could be reaching out with something human. Instead, it was lawful. A notification of intent to seek emergency conservatorship over me. I read it twice before saying anything. They said I was psychologically incompetent to manage my own finances, and that my recent unpredictable behavior, including cutting them off, was evidence that I was spiraling. The letter mentioned emotional hardship, an inability to satisfy duties, and worries from my immediate family regarding my mental health following a cardiac incident. They were attempting to take everything officially. I contacted my lawyer right away. He wasn't astonished. According to him, this is not uncommon in dysfunctional families, especially when someone escapes the cycle of dependence. He informed me that they were trying to submit an emergency petition before I could appear in court. If they timed it correctly, and I missed my opportunity to speak, a judge could temporarily allow it. They had no idea that Gramps and his legal team had already moved. We filed a preemptive response, including notarized letters from my doctors verifying that I was mentally stable and in complete control of my decisions. We provided proof of income, correspondence logs, and a statement from my employer confirming that I had willingly taken time off, but was still actively working. The hearing was canceled before it ever made it to the court docket. They had nothing. Their lawyer discreetly withdrew, likely because he had been fed a family sob story and did not want the professional backlash. However, this did not end the slander effort. I started receiving strange texts from former pals. A girl I dated years ago messaged me, "Sorry to hear I was struggling." A former coworker emailed, wondering whether I needed help getting back on my feet. That's when I knew they were trying something different. Shifting the story, transforming my hospitalization into a breakdown, portraying my silence as proof that I'd gone insane. casting themselves as the only ones attempting to assist. And it could have worked, if they hadn't been so sloppy about it. Nora couldn't keep her mouth closed. Clara couldn't ignore the interest. She shared another video. This time, full production was used, including emotive lighting, background piano music, and a soft filter. She discussed how mental illness does not always seem as you expect, how some scars are unseen, and how she simply wanted her brother back. She never mentioned my name, and she didn't have to. Her followers grabbed it up right away. The comment section was filled with sympathy. Messages like, "You're so strong, praying for your family, he's lucky to have you." But one comment changed everything. Someone shared a screenshot of Nora's prior caption, "Family Day without the drama." The remark, which appeared alongside Clara's crying video, read, "So where was all this concern when he was actually in the hospital?" It went viral. The comments switched. Sympathy evolved to wrath. People started looking into Nora's previous posts, Pa's company accounts, and my father's former public-facing employment. What they discovered was not pretty. Nora had tagged me in the Family Day post when I was in the ICU. Clara tweeted 2 years ago about moochers who pretended to be traumatized. My mother had shared a birthday dinner photo just one day after the doctors informed her of my fall. It all resurfaced. Jen, an old high school classmate I hadn't seen in years, contacted out. She stated that she is currently working in the media. She remembered how things were with my family back then, and how strange it always appeared, even when we were teenagers. She claimed that the internet will only let lying go so far, and it did not. People began asking actual questions. Customers demanded refunds when Clara's small online business received a review bomb. Influencers have discreetly dropped her from collaborations. Nora's sponsorships vanished within days. After tagging her in an apologetic post, a brand with whom she had previously worked unfollowed her. My father's place of employment was also affected. One of his clients had noticed the viral threads and mentioned it at a meeting. He became defensive. HR was alerted. By the end of the week, he was on leave. Then they released him fully. Everything they'd built on lies and entitlement was falling before them. That's when my mother finally broke her silence. She sent a single text message. "Could we please talk?" There's no guilt trip or defense, just those 5 words. I looked at it for a long time. I didn't feel satisfied, not really. What I felt was detachment, as if the remarks came from someone I once knew in a life that no longer exists. I didn't respond. Instead, I launched my notes app and began noting the items I still needed to cut, cancel, and close. They'd finally gone too far. Not only with me, but with the story they were attempting to sell to everyone else. And they still didn't understand the one reality they'd never thought to examine. I was not angry. I was just finished. I assumed they would give up when the conservatorship effort failed. Following the public response, they lost their jobs, sponsors, and any remaining credibility. But I should have known better. Selfish people do not surrender. They adapt. I had just been released from the hospital, still feeble but capable of walking on my own. Gramps picked me up, gave me a drink, and informed me we were going to his place for a few days. I was fine with it. I didn't want to return to my flat. It still felt too near for them. We were halfway to his house when my phone vibrated. It was from an unknown number. "You should definitely come by the house. We need to talk immediately." It was Clara. I removed it without responding. Jen contacted me 2 hours later. Her voice was sharp and urgent. She told me to check Facebook. They'd posted something. Nora, Clara, and my mother, all standing in front of the old house. Behind them is a U-Haul truck. My father is over to the side clutching a box. They seemed distraught. Fake tears and soiled sweaters. Nora wrote the caption, "Losing everything hurts, especially when your own blood turned against you. But we've forgiven him. He is still our brother. We just want him to go home before it's too late." The comments were a battle zone. Half were strangers who offered assistance. The other half consisted of individuals calling them out. I wouldn't have cared until I saw the last photo in the post. A framed childhood photo of myself in Clara's hands with the phrase, "We're keeping a room ready. Family is forever." I wasn't sure whether to be angry or disturbed. It seemed like an emotional ransom. A digital performance designed to make me look like the villain while portraying themselves as victims eager to welcome me back. But the most surprising part happened the next day. I got a letter in the mail from the county clerk's office. Inside was a handwritten will, not from my grandfather, but from my father. A new one. It had been written a week following their botched conservatorship stunt. It listed his assets, which were now very few, and stated that if he died, everything would go to the remaining family members who maintained unity. And then, in shaky handwriting, Colton is disinherited until he returns to this family and reconciles. I looked at the paper for a long time. Then I laughed. Not because I wanted anything from him, I never did, but because the final play, the ultimate move, was always the same. A trap. One final attempt to reintegrate me into the system they created. The message was plain. Get back in line or be deleted. However, they overlooked one vital detail. I wanted to be erased. So I had my lawyer issue a letter in response. It included a legal waiver of any claim to the estate, a permanent no-contact notice, and a signed document removing them as emergency contacts or next of kin for any medical or legal issues involving me. It was basic, direct, and conclusive. They attempted to entice me with guilt, social media, money, and finally, legacy. I chose peace instead. Gramps and I moved out of state 2 weeks later. He mentioned that he wished to visit the mountains again. We purchased a little cabin just outside a peaceful town. I took a remote job, reduced my hours, and began reading and breathing again. Every now and again, someone from the past reaches out. A cousin, an old neighbor, or someone who is curious about what happened. I never explain because folks like Nora, Clara, and my parents are great storytellers. Stories in which they are constantly hurt, betrayed, and abandoned by someone cruel and troubled. Allow them to share their story. I have both truth and peace. Peace is preferable than being loved by those who only appreciate you when you are useful. My parents abandoned me. At 12, after I spilled a soda, years later, I attended my brother's wedding and turned their day into their downfall. My name is Thomas, and I am now 30. Some memories, however, fester rather than vanish. They get sharper over time. I don't talk about my childhood very much, not because I've forgotten, but because stating it out loud makes it feel real again. I feel like I'm 12 years old again, standing in the middle of that gas station parking lot. I was clutching a candy bar that I didn't have enough money to buy, watching my parents' taillights fade into the night. It happened in August, just before school began. We'd gone on one of those weird family bonding vacations that my mother believed we needed, but bonding in our house meant everyone pretending my father's rants were wisdom, and my elder brother Tyler's every lousy thought was a gift to humanity. I was the quiet one, overly sensitive, soft-spoken, and usually in the way. On that particular day I had spilled Sprite in the back seat. Tyler, who was 16 and already an expert at deflecting blame, smirked and added, "I did it on purpose." Dad pulled over at the next petrol station off the highway, his eyes burning. "You're not a baby anymore," he exclaimed. "You want to act mature? You can find your own way home." At first I chuckled. I assumed it was one of his strange jokes, but suddenly the back of the SUV slammed shut and they simply drove. I raced after them for a second, crying out their names, but my voice cracked and vanished under the roar of motors and tires. A clerk stuck his head out of the gas station door, cigarette dangling from his lips, and looked at me as if I were just another stray who had been abandoned. That night, I slept beneath the station's garbage, cuddled up against myself, my heart beating with each passing car. I recall counting the hours. 80 miles from home, no money, no phone, no one to call. When I begged for aid, the clerk refused. "Ain't a daycare kid," he murmured. I did not cry. I believe a part of me froze that night, the portion that believed family meant anything permanent. The next morning, I found a payphone and contacted Mrs. Carter, a teacher I trusted. She was the one that picked me up and drove me back into town. I explained to her that my parents must have forgotten about me. I could see she didn't believe it because she tightened her grasp on the steering wheel. However, she did not press. She simply dropped me off, ensured I had food, and assured me I could always call her. Nobody seemed surprised as I walked through our house's front door. No one apologized. Mom looked up from her laptop and remarked, "Took you long enough." Tyler was on the couch playing video games and muttered, "Should have walked faster." Dad never addressed what had happened, simply nodding at me at breakfast the next morning as if everything was normal. That was the day I quit trying to fit in. I graduated high school like a ghost in the hall. Ate lunch alone and studied in silence. I left as soon as I reached 18, worked 3 jobs, completed community college, and then moved to a university across the nation without informing anyone. I changed my phone number, never left a forwarding address, and for the first time began breathing on my own. I've spent the last decade developing a life they don't know about. I became a software programmer and relocated to a city where no one ever repeated the words, "man up," as if they were a cure for trauma. My friends describe me as grounded and loyal. I even got a rescue dog named Leo, a frightened little mutt who flinches at loud noises. We understand one another. I never expected to hear from them again, yet last week a letter arrived at my flat. There was no return address, but Mom's handwriting on the front was unmistakable, loopy and dramatic. I slowly opened it, partly anticipating a legal threat or another passive-aggressive note about leaving the family. But it was a thick envelope. Inside, Tyler's wedding invitation was embossed in gold calligraphy, all ostentatious and formal, the type of thing that screamed rented grandeur and artificial smiles, and tucked within was a folded piece of notebook paper penned by them. "Thomas, we understand that things have been far between us, but Tyler is getting married, and your presence would be greatly appreciated by the family. He requested that we contact out to you directly. We hope you will come. We would love to reconnect. Mom and Dad are reaching out as if nothing has occurred. Like they hadn't abandoned me to rot beneath a gas station dumpster when I was 12 and never apologized. Like Tyler wasn't the golden kid whose shadow I was never permitted to escape." I sat there looking at the note for a long time. My fingers clenched on the paper's edge, causing it to wrinkle, and for a brief time I considered throwing it away. Almost. But then something inside me paused. I flipped the invitation over. Fancy setting. Outdoor ceremony. Dress code. Formal. There was even a QR code for RSVPs. As if I were just another distant relative. As if they hadn't already taught me the meaning of disposability. I looked at the note again. It would mean a lot to the family. It was interesting since I wasn't the same kid they discarded on the side of the highway anymore, and if they wanted me back in the photo, I had a few ideas for framing it. Let's just say I didn't RSVP right immediately, but I did begin arranging discreetly and meticulously, as I always do, because some debts are not paid in words, but in presence. Sometimes simply turning there is the loudest thing you can do. The instant I saw Tyler's fiance's name, Sophia R. Kensington, engraved in embossed cursive on the invitation, I knew what kind of wedding it would be. Upper middle class perfection, extended games, a live quartet, and bespoke cocktail napkins with their initials. The Kensingtons were local nobility in my area. Old money, gossip and grudges. Sophia was always dressed as if she was going to church or a job interview, even at the age of 15. The kind of girl who never had to compete for attention since it was bestowed upon her like an inheritance. So Tyler got her. Of course he did. The charming eldest son, quarterback smile, parents who surrounded him like he was the sun. My parents most likely wore their approval like jewelry. I searched her up online the same night. She was everything you'd expect. A dentistry school graduate, a groomed Instagram feed full of encouraging slogans and coffee art, and engagement photos taken under a tree that looked like everything out of a wedding magazine. A link to their wedding website was concealed in one of the post's tags. I clicked it. Tyler and Sophia's big day is 3 weeks away. Location: Stonebrook Vineyard and Lodge. Registry: Bloomingdale's, Crate and Barrel, and Amazon. Dress code: black tie is optional. Please arrive 30 minutes before the ceremony starts. Shuttle transportation is offered from the guest hotel. We are very happy to celebrate with friends and family. Family, correct? There was even a section called The Love Story. Tyler wrote it himself, or at least from his perspective. It was all so professional, it could have been written by a public relations firm. I've always been the type of man who believes in fate. But nothing prepared me for Sophia, her grace, her kindness, the way she looked at me and saw more than just the person I used to be. You've grown into a different person than you were before. I read the line 3 times. And then I remembered him as a khaki-wearing bully and a liar with a halo. The same lad who shoved me into a pond at my 12th birthday party and informed our parents that I had slipped. I had to walk home, drenched while everyone else ate cake. They'd been laughing about it for years. I wasn't planning on attending the wedding. Not until I saw that line. Tyler was rewriting his own past, believing there was no collateral damage on his way to adulthood. And now the individuals who had left me behind, literally, were calling me family again. I did not RSVP online. That would have been too easy. Instead, I asked an old college buddy, Jenny, who now works in logistics, to send me a high-end formal suit in midnight blue, custom fit, with a vest that looked like it belonged in a James Bond movie. I even reserved a room at the same premium guest hotel advertised on the website, paying up ahead and using a little different name. I didn't want them to know I was coming. Not yet. I felt if they were going to try to pretend the past did not exist, I'd give them a taste of their own medicine. 2 weeks before the wedding, I sent one email to the RSVP address supplied. It was Sophia's saying, "Looking forward to the celebration. Please don't mention I'm attending. I'd like to surprise the happy couple." There was no reply, but it was marked as read. The week before the wedding, I cleared my schedule, arranged for a sitter for my dog Leo, and packed light, just the suit, a pair of shine shoes, and one old photo, folded and weathered, of me at 12 standing outside that gas station with a rucksack and a blank stare. Mrs. Carter had removed it the morning she picked me up. She had printed it years later and mailed it to me with the simple message, "You survived." I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but it felt natural to bring it. When I arrived at the vineyard the day before the wedding, it looked like a movie set. Rolling hills, polished wooden beams, fairy lights strung through archways, wonderful weather and ideal people. Every aspect was planned to convey warmth and elegance, but in a way that excluded people like me by design. The rehearsal supper was in full swing. I watched from a quiet corner of the outdoor patio, sunglasses on, and a suit jacket draped over my arm. Nobody saw me at first, but then I saw her. Mom. She was thinner than I remembered, like a balloon that had gradually deflated but attempted to preserve its shape. Her hair was tinted a darker brown, almost reddish, and she wore a pearl necklace that contrasted with her sunburned neck. She was laughing, with that loud, brittle laugh that always sounded like she was trying to convince everyone she was okay. Dad stood beside her, wearing a blazer that most likely still had the same money clip in the inside pocket, the one he used to flick open dramatically whenever he wanted to remind us he was supplying. His face seemed puffier than I remembered, as if life had finally pushed back. They were talking to Sophia's parents, smiling, shaking hands, and praising Tyler with the same saccharine tone that used to make my skin crawl. I did not approach them. Not yet. But then Tyler turned, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, we met eyes. And his face sank. Not enough to warn anyone else, but I noticed it. The flare, the implicit question. What is he doing here? That passed over his immaculately manicured expression. He raised a glass to me, hesitated, and then immediately looked away, as if he hadn't noticed me at all. But I knew he did. More significantly, I realized he hadn't informed them that I was on my way. I snuck out before the toast and walked back to the motel, my heart pumping with adrenaline. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear but from anticipation. They'd asked me to come. They wanted me to rejoin the family. I was going to show them what that meant, and I hadn't even spoken yet. Mist and tension hung over the wedding morning. I stood at my hotel room's floor-length window, watching fog sweep across the wine hills like a scene out of a movie. I barely slept. Not from nerves. I wasn't nervous, but rather from recollection. My thoughts replayed everything like a silent movie. Cold pavement behind the gas station. Mrs. Carter's expression when she pulled up. When I arrived home, I found silence. I ironed my shirt carefully and painstakingly, pressing out each crease as if it were a scar that I might flatten. Then I reached for an old folded faded photograph. 12-year-old me stared into the horizon, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. I slipped it into my breast pocket, behind a silk square near my chest. The shuttle to the vineyard was packed with strangers. Distant cousins, longtime neighbors, and Sophia's college classmates. Everyone talked on the venue, the vista, and the attire. Nobody looked my way. I preferred it that way. When I stepped off the shuttle, the surroundings had changed. White chairs spread out across the grass like dominoes. A floral arch took center stage, adorned with ivory roses and pastel greenery. Classical music filled the air, as servers carried around glasses of Prosecco as if it were liquid gold. It was really amazing. I kept to the back. I saw them again. My parents are now seated in the front row, beaming at guests and shaking hands with the officiant. Dad laughed too loudly. Mom held a bouquet of white lilies that did not fit her at all. Tyler stood off to the side in a nice tuxedo, speaking to what I believed was his best man. Sophia hadn't appeared yet. That's when it occurred. An older woman approached me, with exquisite silver hair and a navy blue clothing. She glanced at me for a moment before smiling graciously. "You must be Thomas." I blinked. "I am. I'm Evelyn Kensington, Sophia's mother." "Of course." I straightened a little and extended my hand. She took it gracefully, but also with curiosity. "Tyler told us you might be here. I just wanted to say, thank you for coming. My guard went up immediately. He told you I might come? She nodded, her smile growing tighter. He said there had been some distance, but he hoped this would be a step toward healing. I could have laughed, but I did not. Instead, I said, he's an optimist. She smiled again, but more awkwardly this time. Well, regardless, welcome. And if you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. I saw her go away, her heels biting slightly into the grass. Tyler had informed Sophia's side of the family but not mine. Interesting. The ceremony began like any other. Gentle music played, guests shifted in their chairs, the officiant cleared his throat, and Sophia appeared, glowing, gorgeous, and precisely as you'd imagine. The crowd's combined breath inhaled and held. She walked down the aisle to gentle applause. Tyler waited under the arch like a prince accepting his crown, while I watched from the back row, mute. The ceremony was quick, with typical vows and uneasy laughs. I do's were exchanged as currency. Then came the announcement, the kiss, and the applause. And with that, they were married. The reception was where everything started to unravel. The event was held in a big glass-walled hall that overlooked the vineyard. Chandeliers hang like frozen waterfalls. Every table had a centerpiece of orchids and floating candles. Guests were escorted to their seats using printed calligraphy cards. Mine did not exist. I calmly approached the table where my folks sat. There's an empty chair near them. The name card is designated for the family. I hovered. Mom's gaze fell on me. Oh, you made it, she replied, sipping wine and not standing. Apparently, I said. Dad did not speak. He glanced at me with an unreadable expression and leaned back slightly, as if I were a question he didn't want to answer. I didn't see a seat card for me, I explained quietly. Mom shrugged. Must have been a mistake. Maybe you're at one of the other tables. We didn't handle the seating arrangements. Sure you didn't. I looked around. Tables were almost filled. Laughter came from all directions. And then I noticed Tyler across the floor, deep in conversation with Sophia and two older gentlemen in tuxedos. He saw me. He did not smile. Instead, he walked straight for me. Hey, he murmured, his voice low. Glad you could make it. No thanks to you, I said. He exhaled. Listen, I didn't think you'd actually come. But you invited me. I asked Mom and Dad to invite you. That's different. My jaw clenched. I figured you'd see the invite, toss it and move on like you always do, he told me. I truly looked at him. Tan, stylish, and confident. A man who has never fully paid for anything via blood or silence. I came to see if you remembered, I explained quietly. Remember what? I didn't respond. I reached into my jacket and took out the photograph. I held it up and let it speak. His countenance changed. Subtle but real. Eyes flew to the photo, then to my face, then back. He swallowed. That was years ago. Yes, I answered. And you never said a word. Never told them to turn back. Never checked if I made it home alive. He looked around in case someone overheard. Thomas, it was one bad night. You were dramatic even then. I thought you were over it. Over it. Something inside me stilled. I'm not here to ruin your wedding, I told you. You can relax. He let out a brief, lifeless laugh. Good. But I am staying until the speeches. He looked at me again, as if unsure whether I was bluffing. I wasn't, because the best retribution is not loud. It is surgical. And I had planned a toast that they would never forget. The lights in the ballroom dimmed as servers cleaned the last of the dinner plates. Guests were buzzing in a champagne haze, some leaning back with full stomachs and others dancing in nice little circles to a four-piece jazz band tucked away in the corner. Tyler and Sophia sat at a long head table, their names written in gold letters behind them. Everything shined, including the wine glasses, cutlery, and people. A man wearing a powder blue suit clinked his glass. The room became quiet. It's time for a few words from the people who know the bride and groom best. There was polite clapping, and Sophia's father went up to speak first. His voice was smooth and practiced, a combination of money and warmth. He discussed Sophia's childhood, her dreams, and the first time she addressed Tyler. He even joked about Tyler's appeal, saying, "We didn't even realize he was trying to marry up." Everyone chuckled. The best man, Tyler's college roommate, then took over, keeping things light and amusing. Something about frat parties, Tyler's inability to cook, and his good fortune in meeting Sophia. It was the type of speech you'd expect. A little heart, a little comedy, and no rough edges. The MC then took the microphone again and looked down at a list. And finally, we have a special toast from Thomas. The room became quiet. Every eye shifted. My parents froze mid-sip. Tyler's jaw stiffened. Sophia blinked in confusion, and I got up. I moved slowly to the microphone, ignoring the uneasy shifting around me. Several visitors whispered. Some people appeared puzzled. Others just looked, confused who I was or why I was speaking. I tapped the microphone once. It rang throughout the room. "Good evening," I said with a firm voice. "I'm Thomas, Tyler's younger brother." Several heads turned sharply now. The words landed like a ripple on quiet water. I could practically hear murmurs start to circulate. "Has he got a brother?" "I wasn't sure I was going to come tonight," I explained. "In fact, I spent the last few weeks thinking about whether I should. You see, I haven't spoken to my family in 18 years. Silence. Not the good kind. The kind that sucks the air out of the room. I got a wedding invitation out of nowhere. No call, no email, just a card and a note that said, 'It would mean a lot to the family if you came.'" I let the words rest before pulling the photo from my pocket. This is me at 12 years old. I held it up with 2 fingers. The guests craned their necks to see. This was taken the morning after my parents left me at a gas station, 80 miles from home. I had spilled a soda in the car, and instead of scolding me, they left, told me to man up and figure it out. The crowd changed. Uneasy glances. The sound of a wine glass being gently placed. They didn't come back. They didn't call. I slept behind a dumpster. The only reason I made it home was because a teacher picked me up the next day. I never got an apology. Not from my parents. Not from Tyler. And until this wedding invitation arrived, I thought they were all perfectly happy pretending I didn't exist. I looked at my parents. Dad's face was paler. Mom's lips hung slightly open, as if she was attempting to elicit a response but couldn't find one quickly. "Now, I'm not here to ruin anyone's evening," I assured them. "Sophia, you seem lovely. Your family has been kind and welcoming. And Tyler, well, you've always known how to put on a good face." That line landed hard. His expression shattered for a brief period. But I think weddings are about honesty. About truth. And it wouldn't be honest if I stood here tonight pretending that we were ever close, or that I grew up in a house where family meant protection, not survival. The room was completely silent now. People were barely breathing. I was invited to this wedding to take part in a picture-perfect day. A prop. A brother-shaped placeholder. I turned back to Tyler. "So, consider this my gift to you." I placed the photograph on the head table directly in front of him. A reminder of what it's like to lose touch with relatives. Then I slowly turned and walked away from the microphone. No applause, only startled stillness and a few loud gasps. As I walked by my parents' table, I heard my mother hiss my name, barely audible. My father began to rise, but I did not stop. I did not glance back. I left through the side of the hall and stepped out into the chilly night. The music is now distant behind me. I was not angry. I was not shaking. I was free. But freedom is a funny concept. It doesn't always provide serenity immediately away. Sometimes it just leaves a silence, the kind that makes you wonder what will happen next. I'd made my move, but the consequences were still coming. The journey back to the motel was silent. There's no jazz band, no clinking drinks, and no theatrical laughing ringing off the marble walls. Only the sound of tires on gravel and the faint whir of my thoughts caught up with me. I did not return to my room right away. Instead, I took a walk down one of the vineyard trails behind the hotel, which wound through rows of dark grapevines beneath a starry sky. With each step away from that wedding hall, the tension in my chest dissipated thread by thread. I could still hear my mother's piercing gasp, see Tyler's beautifully arranged face crumble in real time, and feel the puzzled looks of passers-by attempting to link the piece of family that had been purposefully removed from the photograph. For the majority of my life, I thought I was the ghost in my own family. But tonight, I reminded them that I had flesh, blood and memories. And memory is a hazardous thing, especially when those around you depend on forgetting. I returned to the hotel to find a voicemail from an unknown number. "Thomas, it's Sophia." Her voice was low and calm, yet brittle. I am not sure what I expected, but I did not expect that. "I wish someone had told me. I just wanted you to know I'm not mad you said what you did. You deserve to, and I'm sorry." She hung up without leaving me a number to call back. That was the first apology I had received in 18 years. And it didn't even come from my family. I departed early the next morning. No breakfast, no long goodbyes, just a quick email to the front desk asking them to cancel the remainder of my reservation and send me the final cost. I didn't want to wait around for the aftermath. I knew my parents. I knew Tyler. They'd either pretend nothing happened or try to spin it as a misunderstanding. Perhaps both. But I knew the photograph was still on the head table when I departed. I kept the outfit, dumped the tie, and went home. And once I arrived home, truly home, in my modest apartment, where Leo greeted me with enthusiastic barks and a wagging tail, something unusual occurred. People began reaching out. First, it was my cousin Rachel. She contacted me on LinkedIn. She claimed she had heard about the speech from someone at the wedding and wanted to apologize for never inquiring where I went after I disappeared. Said she always felt it was strange that no one ever mentioned me again, but assumed it wasn't her place to inquire. We spoke for a while. She inquired whether she may pay a visit. I didn't say yes, nor did I say no. Mrs. Carter responded with a message. She still remembered. She still had the photograph that she had taken. "I've always wondered what happened to you," she wrote. "I'm so proud of you, Thomas." I hadn't sobbed in years until that night. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, agonizing release, the sensation you get after holding your breath for too long and then breathing. I started sleeping better and waking up earlier. I discovered a new rhythm. My job seemed easier, and my code was cleaner. I took Leo on longer walks. I started writing again. Short tales, essays, anything to channel the chaos in my thoughts into anything coherent. A week later, I received an email from a woman who worked for a group that helps alienated adults, children who have been cut off, disowned, or abandoned. She'd learned about the wedding speech from a friend of a friend who worked the event, and she felt it was the most quietly powerful thing she'd ever heard. She inquired whether I would be willing to speak at one of their exclusive retreats. Not as a motivational speaker, but as someone who has experienced it. I said yes. That single event morphed into 2, then 4. Then came an invitation to speak on a panel at a university symposium about family separation and trauma healing. I didn't wear the suit to those. Instead, I wore a basic shirt, trousers, and, on occasion, a blazer to look more polished, but I always carried the photograph. I'd show it when I spoke and explain the narrative precisely like it happened. No exaggeration, just the facts. And every time someone approached me afterward and said, "That happened to me too," I knew I wasn't alone. I'd never been. My voice, which they had previously described as too soft, sensitive, and quiet, had finally found its volume. It wasn't vengeance, not yet. But there was power. And with each person I assisted, story I heard, and hand I shook, I felt it expand. Not the rage, but the clarity and assurance. Tyler returned to his new wife and polished reputation, unaware of the ripple I had caused or the knowledge that I was far from finished. Because someone else from their side will soon arrive, asking for answers. It began with another email from Sophia, but this time it was not brief, courteous, or neatly written. This one was raw. "Thomas, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did your parents really leave you like that? At 12? I asked Tyler. He didn't deny it. He just said, "It's complicated." But you didn't sound complicated when you told that story. You sounded clear, like someone who's been carrying something heavy for a long time. If it's true, I need to know more. Please. I looked at the message for a long time. Sophia had every incentive to close the door and go on. She could have disregarded me, seen it as family drama, and dismissed me as bitter or unstable. However, she didn't. She asked for the truth, and I was not going to waste it. So I responded. I told her everything. There are no dramatics or exaggerations, simply the facts. I told her about the gas station, the quiet when I returned, how I got through school, how my name was never spoken again, and how they rewrote the family photo as if I were a blemish they could remove. I did not blame her. I did not ask her to choose sides. I just told her the truth and let it sit. She replied the following day. "I believe you, and I need time to process this. They never told me. Tyler said he was an only child until we got engaged. They erased you. And now I'm wondering what else they've rewritten. Would you ever be willing to meet for coffee? Just the two of us." It was like watching a crack form in a window that had before been pristine. I knew not to push. I agreed, but I let her select the time and location. We met a week later in a quiet cafe 2 towns from her and Tyler's house. She wore no makeup, pearls, or bridal polish, just a hoodie and pants, hair pulled back, eyes bloated as if she hadn't slept. She sat down and didn't even say hi. She simply asked, "What else did they do?" So I told her. Not everything. Not the minor humiliations, the 1,000 small cuts that never bled enough for anybody to see, but the major ones. Like when my mother forgot my birthday twice in a row and then blamed me for not reminding her, or when Dad refused to co-sign a minor student loan, stating, "You'll just waste it," while giving Tyler $5,000 for a trip to Cancun. Sophia kept her hands wrapped around her mug the entire time. She asked inquiries and made mental notes. She did not try to defend them. Instead, she listened. Finally, she said, "They called you a ghost at the wedding." That's how Tyler explained. "He said you vanished when you were a teen. Said you always had a flair for the dramatic." I blinked. "They used the word ghost?" She nodded. I couldn't help laughing. Not because it was hilarious, but because it was so incredibly perfect. "They didn't lose a son," I explained. "They buried one." Sophia went quiet and leaned forward, her voice low. "You know what scares me most?" I waited. She muttered, "What if they do that to our kids someday?" And there it was. The shift. Tyler was unaware that uncertainty had taken root. Sophia stood before she could say anything else. She stated she needed time. She was thankful, and she wasn't ready to talk to him just now, but she'd be in touch. It was 3 days before I received a letter in the mail. As previously stated, there is no return address. But this time, the handwriting was not my mother's. This was my father's. Inside, a note was scribbled in tight, uneven letters. "Thomas, I don't know what you think you're doing. This isn't helping anyone. You're bringing shame on the family. Let it go. If you keep stirring things up, there will be consequences. We gave you a second chance to be included. Don't make us regret it. Dad." There it was. No apologies or regrets, just a threat disguised as dignity. I sat with the note for a moment. Then I placed it next to a photo of myself at the age of 12. 2 items from the same legacy. And I smiled because I finally got what I needed. Proof. Words penned with his own hand, expressing who he was and is today. I scanned the letter, saved it in a secure area, and backed it up on 2 cloud drives. Then I took up the phone. I contacted a journalist who I had met at one of the trauma seminars. She once assured me, "If you ever decide to share your story, I'll help you do it right." She answered the first ring. "I'm ready," I said. "But I don't want to just talk. I want to show them." She hesitated and asked, "How far are you willing to go?" I looked down at the note, photo and name on the return invitation that attempted to erase me. "All the way," I said. The piece was titled, "Left Behind. One Man's Quiet Escape from a Family That Tried to Erase Him." It went up on Tuesday morning. By lunchtime, it had been shared thousands of times. Julia Myers, the journalist I worked with, had done her research. She checked every detail. She questioned Mrs. Carter, validated the gas station event, and even tracked down my old landlady, who attested that I had put myself through school without family support. The piece contained a photo of me when I was 12, standing beside a dumpster with a ripped rucksack and shattered sneakers. It includes quotes from my wedding speech. It included my father's letter, which was slightly blurred to protect my privacy, as well as Sophia's consent to state that she had contacted me thereafter. Julia was careful and exact. Nor a tabloid story, nor a scandal-baiting attack job. Just the truth, pure and unadulterated. And that is why it burst, because it was not loud, it was honest. Comments flooded in. People commented that it reminded them of their own estrangement, of being rejected, supplanted, or silenced. Others commended the restraint I demonstrated at the wedding. A few people speculated which vineyard it was, but I never confirmed it. But what mattered most were the private messages I received, dozens of them from people who had been discarded, forgotten and labeled as problem children by families that refused to accept responsibility. But the best one came from a Kensington, Sophia's older brother. His name was Adrian, and he didn't mince words. "I always thought Tyler was fake, too polished, too rehearsed. Now I know why. I'm sorry they did that to you. My parents are furious. Not at you, but at Tyler. They feel like they were lied to. Used. They're meeting with Sophia today. Thought you'd want to know." I didn't respond. I did not need to. Because Sophia sent another email 2 days later. "Thomas, I read the article, I saw the comments, I showed Tyler, he exploded, he said you ambushed him, he said you made it all sound worse than it was, but you didn't even share everything. And that's what made me realize you're telling the truth. He asked me to choose. I chose. I'm staying at my parents' place for the time being. The marriage is being annulled. I'm sorry it had to happen like this. But thank you for not allowing me to enter that lie with blinders on. Sophia. I reread the message 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. Because I was not celebrating. I was not gloating. I was remembering. I remember standing in our hallway at 12 years old, holding a gas station candy bar and thinking, they have to come back. They have to. And now, some 2 decades later, the family that had abandoned me had finally experienced what it meant to lose control of the narrative. It was not over. Because 3 days after the piece was published, my parents called. I'm not sure how they acquired my number. Maybe from an old contact, or maybe they just started paying attention to the locations I'd spoken at. But when I saw unknown number, I sent it to voicemail. Then I listened. It was my mother. Her voice trembled. Not with sadness, but rage. Thomas, how dare you? We invited you. We tried to be civil and you humiliated us. You've ruined Tyler's life. Sophia's parents are threatening legal action over the gifts, the deposits, the reputation. You think this is justice? It's cruelty. Vindictive, petty cruelty. I hope you're happy. I hope you're proud of yourself. Then my father called. His voice was not angry. It was silent, nearly defeated. You always were too soft. I should have known you'd grow into the kind of man who'd twist a moment into a weapon. Congratulations. You've destroyed your family. Don't ever call us again. Then he hung up. I stared at the wall for a moment, wondering if the words would sting or resonate as they used to. However, they didn't. Because I did not destroy my family. They shattered the part of me that still required them. And that was the difference. I stood up, walked to my desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the photo one more time. The 12-year-old boy who had no idea what he would become. I smiled at him. Then I put the photograph away. Not because I was burying the past, but because I had finally completed writing the conclusion. The consequences did not occur all at once, it arrived in bits. First, there were rumors. Mutual pals from my hometown have reached out. People I hadn't spoken with in over a decade. Some privately messaged me in disbelief, while others expressed guilt. I had no idea. I assumed you moved for college. Your folks always called you challenging. Then followed the social media changes. My parents, who had spent years crafting their online presence, suddenly went black. Family photos started vanishing from their pages. The banner, "Proud Parents of Tyler and Sophia," gone. The most telling sign. Tyler deleted his entire wedding album overnight. No explanation, just gone. Tyler had taken a leave of absence from his work, which I learned later through a modest LinkedIn update. The blurb stated, "Personal matters." But I knew better. Sophia had carried through with the annulment. She lived temporarily with her brother before returning to her studies. She left me a brief message weeks later. I'm rebuilding. It's messy, but it's mine. Thank you again. I hope you're doing okay. I was more than okay. The nonprofit asked me to become a regular contributor. I started working with them part-time, coordinating outreach for other estranged young adults. I began writing not only articles, but a book. The working title is, Ghost Son. What happens if they pretend you never existed? I did not compose it for vengeance. I wrote it for my younger self. For the youngsters who are still silently packed a bag they won't open because they are worried their footsteps will be too loud. One day I received a letter from Mrs. Carter, not my parents or Tyler, still in her loopy, generous cursive. Dear Thomas, I clipped your article, read it twice and hung it on the wall of my classroom, right above the desk where I keep extra snacks for students who never bring lunch. I sometimes tell them about you, not by name, but by your story, and how being kind isn't just about helping someone out, it's also about remembering them when everyone else forgets. I'm so proud of you. Love, Mrs. V. That one made me cry. Not the silent tears I was accustomed to. Real ones. The kind that caused something to crack open inside. Because for the first time in my life, I no longer felt the need to prove anything. I was not a shadow. I wasn't forgotten. I was here. I had survived, and suddenly I was alive. So, when people ask me how it felt to stand in front of my family and tell them the truth, I simply grin. Because the truth, the best revenge, does not include seeing them disintegrate. It's witnessing yourself rise in broad sunshine while they're still attempting to rewrite the darkness. And I have never looked back. My sister helped me for 1 week, then I called her ugly and lazy. She told me, no wonder he left you, and walked out of my life forever. I am the eldest sister, 34 years old. One child, 4, learning how to tie his own shoelaces. And one baby, 6 months old, who often sleeps like an angel in my arms. People say I'm sharp-tongued, hot-tempered, controlling. They don't ask why a woman becomes that way. No one asks what it feels like to be betrayed in the 8th month of pregnancy. To watch your husband vanish with the wedding gold, the bracelet, things my parents gave me to weather storms, and leave me with a child staring at me and asking, "Where's Dad?" If you've ever pushed a dead car up a hill in the rain at night, you'll understand. The whole slope echoing only with your own breath. You plant your feet, hunch your shoulders, push inch by inch, head down. No one comes to rescue you. You do it yourself. You do it yourself so much that you forget you were ever helped before. My younger sister, the stable one, the happy one, the spoiled one, got married, moved in with her husband, and lived her new full life like the wedding photos framed on the wall. I was truly happy for her. But the truth is, inside me there was a crack. What I once had turned to ashes, while she was just laying the foundation for her own home. If you want to call it jealousy, fine. I call it something else. The fear of being left alone. She and I have never gotten along. We fought as children, fought through high school, fought as adults, petty things that could explode like a pan of hot oil. I said she was weak, she said I was cruel. Maybe we were both right. My father lives near me. He still helps watch my 4-year-old, rocks the baby so I can rush through a shower. That week he went on vacation, and he really decided for, my sister to come help me for a week. I thought, good. Maybe this is the time she sees my world. Not through a few minutes on the phone, but through the smell of diapers, the cries that tear through sleep, the cold meals interrupted by a child's vomiting. I wanted her to see, so she would understand. The first day, she and her husband came early. He mowed the lawn. She sat on the sofa holding the little bundle of fluff. I said thank you. But what thank you is enough to cover an endless week. By evening, exactly 6 o'clock, they went back to my father's house. I cleared the dishes, counted bottles, looked at the laundry pile, smelled the fresh cut grass and felt a stab in my chest, as if I had just paid for a service, not received kindness from family. On the 3rd day her husband picked up my boy from school. I was grateful. But too much gratitude makes me afraid. Gratitude unsaid becomes silent debt. And debts must be paid. I looked at her sitting there. She didn't talk much. Her eyes slid away when I brought up her weight. In her silence I saw avoidance. I hate silence. Silence to me is the pit people throw themselves into to escape the hard question. What do you want from your life? Don't you want to lose weight? I asked. My voice was sharp as a blade slicing paper. She pressed her lips together. I'm trying. Trying how? I heard my own harshness. You're lazy. You just sit here. Maybe, right then, I was wrong. But my wrongness didn't come from malice. It came from the stubbornness of someone life had beaten with whips. I had learned that no one pulls you out of the mud except yourself. I had learned that your body is your last fortress. If it falls, you have nothing left. I had learned that speaking bluntly, even if it hurts, is better than pretending to be kind while everyone drowns. On the 4th night she whispered to me about children, tracking cycles, fatigue, nausea. She said she had lost one just 2 weeks ago. I froze. I didn't hug her. I didn't react like some perfect comfort video people love to watch. I listened, and felt a stone fall into my chest. Something inside me burst open. The bitter water rose to my throat, but I swallowed. I had no right to collapse. I still had bottles to wash, clothes to hang, alarms to set for 2 a.m. I looked at her, saw her swollen eyes and a sky caving in, but my arms were holding the baby, and my life has no pause button. Whatever you need, just tell me, she said. I heard it like someone tossing me a thin rope. I wanted to say, don't just try, you must fight. But what came out was, you have to change. And God, when I said change, I pronounced it like a command. On the 5th day, I watched her in the mirror. I heard her breath. I knew she hated her body. I knew because I once hated mine even more. After my first child, my face was round as the moon, veins burst in my chest, stretch marks purple as lightning strikes. I never took pictures. I deleted every photo. I had lived it. The feeling of staring into a mirror and seeing yourself deformed. I understood. But understanding didn't soften me. Understanding made me angrier. Why know and not act? Why keep waiting? You always talk, she murmured. But do you ever listen? I gave a cold laugh. I've listened until I'm so tired no sound gets through anymore. I wanted to say, I listen all night, the baby's cries, my chest wheezing, the fear whispering, if you faint right now, who will hold the baby? But I didn't. I threw out another line. Dad also told me to talk to you about your weight. Yes, I lied. I dragged Dad in to give my words weight. I knew I was cornering her. I knew. And I still did it. That evening, while tidying toys, I saw her husband look at me. Polite, gentle eyes, like all kind men have. I knew his type, soft-spoken, but if it comes to defending his wife, he stands like a wall. I muttered a greeting, my bones heavy as lead. By 8:30, the baby was asleep. By 9, the boy was snoring. I collapsed into a chair, rubbing my temples. She sat across from me, hugging a pillow. The TV showed a weight loss program. A girl's before and after. The audience clapped wildly. She sighed. She's really good. I switched off the TV. She's good because she stood up, I said. You just sit. Her breath hitched. Stop it. I'll stop when you get up. She looked at me like I was a beast. What more do you want? I've been here all week. Here. Then at 6 you go home. Here. Like clocking in. I laughed. Thanks. But that kind of thanks gets paid back with sulking. Maybe at that moment, anyone watching from the outside would hate me. I heard my own words and felt goosebumps rise all over my skin. But on the other hand, her silence made me want to smash the table. I knew she was scared. I knew she was in pain. But I carried a different kind of pain. The kind that makes you climb onto your own back to haul your life forward. You're ugly. I blurted out. One word, ugly, shot from my teeth like a stone. Her face turned pale. I could almost hear glass cracking. You're lazy, I added. You won't even pull yourself off that sofa. She choked. I saw her hands trembling. God, I knew that sign. That panic attack rising like a wave. But when you've lived long enough with storms, you start to despise the waves. You're selfish with your future child, I said. You think silence is gentleness. Silence is cruelty to yourself. Stop it, she whispered. Don't say any more. I'm having an attack. Have it, I muttered. At least that's a reaction. That line, when I remember it now, was the cruelest thing I ever said. Night fell. The fridge hummed softly. I carried the baby into the room, laid him down, came back out. She was still sitting there, her eyes wet. I stood in the middle of the living room, my hands empty, feeling my life split in two halves. One half the mother dragging a car up a rainy hill. The other half the sister throwing stones at her sibling to force her to run. I hated both. I needed both. Tomorrow, I said, you'll walk with me. Not much. 20 minutes. She shook her head. I'm tired. Tired is the biggest reason people need to get up. I panted. 7 o'clock. I'll knock. She didn't answer. I turned off the light, went back to the room. In my head was the sound of footsteps. The footsteps of a woman who has to be mother, father, wall, lamp, everything. The next morning, 5 minutes to 7, I was already outside her door. I raised my hand to knock. Then let it drop. Inside was a faint breath. Maybe she had just dozed off. I stood there, my hand trembling, and felt in my chest a dry well. No strength left to be kind. No strength left to be cruel. I turned away, went down to the kitchen, the kettle starting to whistle. I poured the water. My phone buzzed. A message from Dad. A photo of the sea. Harsh sunlight. The words, "Everything okay?" I typed, "Okay." I erased it. I typed again, "Okay." I erased it again. Finally, I sent a thumbs up emoji, the language adults use when they don't have the courage to tell the truth. "Sis." Her voice rasped behind me, thin and raw. I turned. She stood there, eyes red, hands cradling her stomach as if holding something invisible. I'm sorry about last night." I gripped the cup handle tight. "Yeah," I answered. "Today let's just start over." I didn't hug her. I was afraid if I hugged, I would cry. That noon, when her husband came to pick up my boy from school, I glanced out the window. Sunlight poured over the gleaming roof of their new car. I heard myself let out a breath, short and broken like a sob. That was it, half a day of peace before the real storm rolled in. And I, the eldest sister, the woman cut by a knife in places no one could see, was ready to say the thing the whole family would hate me for. "You must change. Not tomorrow. Now." "Don't push me," she whispered. No one is pushing you, I replied. And in that instant, I knew I was lying. I still remember that afternoon clearly. Late sunlight slanted through the curtains, gold spilling across the baby's face in my arms. He slept, breathing evenly, but in my chest was a thunderstorm. My sister sat across from me, fingers locked tight, eyes swollen red. I spoke, she fell silent. I asked, she avoided. That silence to me was not gentleness, it was defiance. Do you plan to change at all? I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. I'm trying, she stammered. Trying? Trying how? Sitting on the sofa all week, is that trying? She swallowed. Said nothing. I heard the hiss inside my own head. Silent again. Always silent. I shot to my feet, marched up in front of the TV and pointed straight at her. You're lazy. You're ugly. You won't even bother to stand up. Have you thought about your child in the future? What kind of mother will you be? She trembled, fists clenching her shirt. I knew she was in the middle of an attack. I recognized it instantly, heart racing, breath broken. But instead of softening, I said the words that still echo like blades. At least an attack proves you're alive. Sitting still like this, you're already dead. Her eyes went blank. She shot up, staggered outside. I heard the stairwell door, the heavy footsteps. I held my baby tighter, breathing in, and my father's old words echoed in my head. She's fragile. Don't push too hard. But how could I not push? Life doesn't spare the weak. Before I could think further, the bedroom door swung open, my sister threw herself into her husband's arms. I followed, my voice rising. I'm her sister. I have the right to speak. I have the right to remind her. He didn't shout, but his gentle eyes flared with resolve. He slammed the door right in my face. Bang! The wood shuddered through my chest like a slap. In my own house. I inhaled sharply, clutching the baby tighter, then shoved the door open again. No one shuts a door on me in my own house. This is my house. Please, he said softly, still calm. She's having a panic attack. I'm trying to calm her down. I laughed bitterly, spitting out the words, this is my house, I'll say whatever I want. In that moment, the argument was no longer between me and my sister. It became a standoff between me and my brother-in-law. He held her close, eyes fixed on me like I was the enemy. And I, with a sleeping baby in my arms, stood in my own living room and felt myself being shoved out. My sister sobbed. I can't take it. Then she bolted into the bathroom. The sound of retching tore through the air, wave after wave. He rushed after her, leaving me alone in a room full of shadows. I screamed after them. There. Always the same. Running. Crying. Making the whole world pity you. Who can live your life for you? They didn't answer. I heard the bathroom door slam shut. The retching went on. I stood frozen for a few seconds, my heart pounding, feeling like I was locked outside a play I never wanted to be cast as the villain in. He came back, eyes red, voice tight. Stop dragging this out. Don't make her suffer more. I gave a bitter laugh. Suffer? She doesn't know what suffering is. Suffering is when your husband steals all your gold and disappears. Suffering is sitting on the floor 8 months pregnant with no one coming. Suffering is a baby crying all night until your tears dry up into stone. That's suffering. His voice hardened. You're wrong. This isn't the way. I shouted, my voice shattering like glass. No. The only way is to tell her the truth. She needs to hear it, even if she hates me. Just then, my sister stumbled out, pale, trembling hands. She looked at me as if to pierce straight through. Then she hissed between her teeth, voice small but ice cold. No wonder. He left you. I froze. My whole body felt sliced in half. Those words fell heavier than any slap I'd ever taken. In my arms, the baby stirred, wailed. I heard nothing except that sentence. No wonder he left you. I wanted to scream, to smash everything. But my throat locked tight. Then I saw her tears. She turned, grabbed her husband, and together they dragged themselves out the door. I heard the shuffle of sandals, the twist of the doorknob. I screamed after them. Fine, go. I swear I'll never ask you for anything again. Never. The door slammed. I stood abandoned in the dark house, my baby crying in my arms, my chest ripped open by one sentence. And I knew. From that moment on, she and I had fallen onto opposite sides of the same abyss. Only when the house was empty did the explosion truly happen inside me. The baby's cries rang like a fire alarm, and I rocked him with trembling hands, haunted by her words. No wonder he left you. I collapsed into a chair. My knees shook, breath ragged. Never, not even when my husband dragged the last suitcase out the door, had I felt this bare. Just one sentence. It cut deeper than a year of betrayal. I grabbed my phone, the screen lit up. A message. From her, no, from her husband. Cold as a verdict. From now on, consider my wife and our children dead to you. If you need to calculate gas money or anything else from this week, let us know, we'll pay. But don't contact us again. I bit my lip. My fingers shook as I typed. How dare you? Then deleted it. Typed again. I only spoke the truth. Deleted. In the end, I sent nothing. I tossed the phone on the table. That night, I didn't sleep. The baby cried 3 times. I rocked him, eyes dry, lips whispering like a curse. You say I deserve to be abandoned? I was abandoned already. And I'm still here. The next morning my father texted from his trip. Everything okay? I stared at the words, choking. I almost typed. Number. Your daughters just tore each other's hearts to pieces. But instead I sent a smiley face. I knew well. When he returned, he would side with her. He always did. He'd say, she's weak. You must give way. For years I'd heard that line. But what about me? Do I ever get to be given way? That afternoon, I sat with my 4-year-old. He asked, Mom, where's Auntie? I swallowed hard. She went home. Will Auntie come back? I froze. My son looked up, waiting. I gave a crooked smile. No, probably not. He lowered his head, whispered, but I like Auntie. I like Uncle too. Another crack split my heart. I hugged him, but inside me boiled a blind fury. You like her, and she treats your mother like trash. 3 days later, another message arrived, this time from her. Don't ever call me again. All you do is scream, curse, make me afraid. You're a terrible sister. You don't deserve me. I read it. Then I smirked. This time I replied without deleting. Yeah, I'm terrible. Terrible, but I survive. Terrible, but my kids still have a mother. You, without that gentle husband, would have fallen long ago. She didn't answer. That night after putting the baby to sleep, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, yellow light falling across the tiled floor. I listened to the wind hissing through the door. I recalled every detail. Her on the sofa, red-eyed, holding her stomach. I called her ugly, lazy, selfish. She called me the woman left behind. Who was right? Who was wrong? Or maybe we were the same, both crushed by life in different ways. The phone lit up again. Another message, this time from my father. I've heard your sister's side. I'll call when I have time. I'm tired. Don't trouble me more. I gripped the phone, teeth clenched. There. As I said. He always believes her. I wanted to reply. Dad, she's not innocent. She threw the cruelest words at me. But like always, I stayed silent. I've learned this. The silent one never loses immediately. That night, I wrote in my journal. Typed, deleted, typed, deleted. Finally, only one line remained. If I'm the bad one, at least I dare to speak. You. All you do is cry. I shut the laptop. The next day, a neighbor stopped by, hinting, last week the house was lively, now it's so quiet. I forced a smile. Yeah, families argue sometimes. But behind my back I heard them whisper, she's so harsh, poor younger sister. I walked on, hollow inside. Poor her? Who pities me? That night my boy asked again. Mom, doesn't Auntie love you? I bit my lip, forcing back tears. It's okay, I still have you. But when he slept, I whispered into the dark. It's not that I don't love her. I love her enough to tear her out of that soft shell. I love her enough to let the world hate me rather than watch her wither away. I sat like that until morning, watching the clock crawl. Another day passed, and the distance between my sister and me stretched another mile. 5 days later, my father came home from his trip. He brought a small gift bag, a bottle of imported liquor, printed seaside photos still smelling of fresh paper. He sat on the couch, turned on the TV, sighed. Traveling is fun, but home is still better. I stood there, holding my baby, heart tangled. I knew this conversation couldn't be avoided. And just as I expected, He called me over. About last week. I've heard bits. Tell me your side. I inhaled deeply. I told him half-truths. I said she argued. I said she stayed silent until she burst into tears. I said her husband stepped in, shut the door, argued back. I said I only wanted her to change. I left out the words I hurled at her: ugly, lazy, selfish. I left out the sentence she carved into me. No wonder he left you. Father sat, face calm. Then he said, she told it differently. She said you cursed her, pushed her, made her spiral. Did you? I bit my lip. Dad, I only wanted her to stand up. If she stays this week, she'll end up killing herself. He looked straight at me, his old eyes heavy. Don't you see? You're becoming your mother. I froze. My heart clenched. Dad, why would you say that? He sighed, slow. Back then, your mother thought the same way. Always forcing you all to toughen up, obey, live as she demanded. Until the family exploded. She lost everything. Lost her husband. Lost her children. Do you remember? I swallowed hard. My mother's image flashed. Her screaming. Her scolding. Then collapsing. My hands shook. You're saying I'm like her? Yes. You are. And you're walking her path. You think you're protecting the kids, but you're making them afraid. You think you love your sister, but you're crushing her under your heel. I screamed, voice breaking. No, I'm not like her. She abandoned me when my husband betrayed me. You stayed silent. I had no choice but to harden myself. Otherwise, who would raise the kids? Who would protect them? He said nothing. Just looked at me. Shook his head. Then quietly. The price of what you call strength is what? You've already lost your sister. That sentence landed like a verdict. I sobbed, clutching the baby in my arms. She cried out, and I carried her into the room, my heart a tangled mess. 2 days later, I heard she had gone to see my father with her husband. They told everything, without leaving out a word. They even told the line I'll never forget. No wonder he left you. Father told me afterward, his face heavy. After listening, I just sighed. You two, like knives against each other. But this time, more of the fault lies with you. I trembled with rage. I shouted, it's always like this. Always me to blame. I'm not the only one at fault. Father stayed calm. She said she lost a child. She's weak. And you, her sister, stabbed straight into that wound. Isn't that the same as killing her again? I was stunned. I knew I was wrong, but I wouldn't admit it. I only screamed. She's weak to the core. If she never changes, her whole life will be nothing but tears. I won't let my children grow up like that. Father shook his head. You think you're saving, but really you're destroying. Look closely. Your 4-year-old is already used to his mother shouting. What do you want him to remember of his childhood? Shouts? Cries? Or the sound of your sister groaning in the bathroom from panic? I collapsed into the chair. For the first time, I was speechless. The conversation ended with one sentence from my father that would echo in my head for days. You say you're strong. But the truly strong are not the ones who shout the loudest. The truly strong are the ones who make others feel safe. I said nothing. I held my child, turned my face away, swallowed the tears. Inside I wondered, if I really am like my mother, will I be able to stop before I lose everything? The house was silent. But this silence wasn't peace. It was heavy, compressed, like concrete poured on my chest. I heard the ticking clock, the wind slipping through the door crack, and in my heart the echo of my father's words. The truly strong are the ones who make others feel safe. I sneered. Safe, huh? Has anyone ever asked if I was safe? I was abandoned 8 months pregnant. I stayed awake countless nights. I raised 2 children alone. Who gave me safety? I looked around the room, toys scattered everywhere, the sofa where my sister once sat, silent, teary-eyed. I saw her shadow still there. I heard again her whisper. No wonder he left you. I clutched my head, screamed, shut up, shut up. The baby startled, cried. I panicked, hugged her, soothed her. In her clear eyes, I saw myself, bare, ugly, bitter. I whispered, my love. Your mother isn't a monster, she just doesn't know how to be gentle. The next day I received one final message from her husband. From now on, anything you want to say it to your father. With us, everything is finished. I threw the phone on the table. I shouted into the emptiness. Fine. Go. I'll never need you for the rest of my life. But when my voice echoed off the walls, it sounded hollow, like the cry of a failure trying to deceive herself. My 4-year-old ran out, eyes wide. Mom, why are you crying? I wiped my face, forced a smile. I'm not crying. I'm just shouting. Will Auntie come back? He asked. I choked. No, she's gone. I like Auntie. I like Uncle. I didn't answer. I turned away, biting my lip until it bled. My son loved her, while she tore his mother apart. So who was right? Who was wrong? That night I stood before the mirror. My hair wild, eyes sunken. I stared straight into myself and asked, "Are you the villain? Are you your mother? Have you destroyed everything?" The reflection said nothing. In my head, 2 voices spoke, one from my sister, one from my father. You're a terrible sister. You don't deserve me. You're repeating your mother. I slammed my hand on the sink. No. I'm not her. I'm not a monster. But then, a single tear slid down my cheek. This time, I whispered, not screamed. Or maybe, I really am the monster. I'm still writing these lines with the clock near 2 a.m. Both children are asleep. The house is quiet, terrifyingly so. I type, delete, as if each word is a scar cut into my skin. I think of her, the sister I once swore I would protect. I remember when we were kids, she fell off her bike, her knee bleeding. I carried her on my back, running home. She cried, clung to me. I was her shelter once. So when did I become the nightmare in her eyes? Maybe from the first time I yelled at her. Maybe from the day I forced her to be strong, when all she needed was a hug. Maybe from the day I believed love meant pushing hard. I sighed. I wondered. If tomorrow she knocked on my door again, would I open my arms? I want to believe I would. But maybe I'd still be harsh, bitter, still push her away. Because that's the only way I know to survive. So, am I the villain? Maybe. But I'm also the witness of my own life. A life wrecked by betrayal, by ruins, by endless nights rocking children with eyes wide open. If I'm wrong, my wrongness comes from distorted love. Love laced with fear. I don't know how to love gently. I only know how to love by shouting, by pushing others to the edge, hoping they'll learn to fly. Maybe I've lost my sister forever. Maybe she'll tell the world I'm a monster, a cruel sister. Maybe she's right, but if one day she stands tall enough to say, "Sis, I'm okay now," then I, the villain, will cry. And that time, I won't hide it. Until then, I'm still here. A mother, a sister, a woman. Not gentle, not kind, but alive, and surviving. How are you paying for this place? My sister mocked me at dinner. Until the waiter revealed the truth that left my entire family in shock. It all began 5 years ago when I walked away from all my family expected of me. They always evaluated my decisions, dismissing my culinary ambitions as beneath our family name. They had no idea that today, as they assemble at Maison, one of the city's most elite restaurants, to celebrate my sister Vivian's engagement, they would be confronted with how much had changed. My tummy tightens as I adjust my plain black dress. Sometimes the most difficult reservations to make are about your own past. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut, being a Mitchell meant something special. We were more than just wealthy. We left a legacy. My parents, Elizabeth and Charles Mitchell, based their identities on status markers like the correct address, schools, and occupations. Our enormous colonial home hosted fundraisers at which my mother paraded us children around like accessories, her pride proportional to how well we fit into her ideal of prosperity. The Mitchell children are destined for greatness, she'd tell her acquaintances at garden parties, my father nodding in agreement behind his whiskey glass. Vivian has already decided on Yale Law, and Daniel's mathematical abilities are really promising. He'll make an excellent investment banker. When guests looked at me, the middle kid, my mother's smile tightened. Draw has creative inclinations. She'll find her way. What she meant was that I was the family's letdown. While Vivian excelled at debate club and Daniel won math competitions, I spent countless hours in our housekeeper Maria's domain, the kitchen. Maria, a warm-hearted woman from Greece, saw something in me that my parents did not. Genuine passion. You have the hands for this work, she'd add as I assisted her in kneading bread or neatly dicing vegetables. The way you taste, the way you smell, you understand food in your soul. By the age of 13, I started developing my own recipes. When my parents went on vacation, I began holding underground dinner parties for my pals at the age of 16. My kitchen became my sanctuary, where I felt most completely myself. Cooking, a servant's work, my father remarked when I mentioned culinary school during my junior year of high school. Mitchell's hire chefs, they don't become them. To pacify them, I applied to business schools and eventually enrolled at Dartmouth, where my father and grandfather had gone. Even yet, I found methods to pursue my genuine passion by taking food science electives and nutrition classes that I could rationalize as complementary to business administration. I launched an underground supper club in my apartment, charging students for inventive 5-course dinners to help support my covert weekend courses with local cooks. My double life lasted until graduate school. I was 6 months into an MBA program that was making me really miserable when Chef Julien Marchand, a French culinary expert with 3 Michelin stars, came to campus for a lecture series. He approached me after sampling my meal at a university event during which I had assisted with catering. "Who taught you to make a reduction like this?" he said, his accent strong but his gaze earnest. "I taught myself," I said. "From books, videos, and experimenting." He handed me his card. "You're wasting your talent here. Come to my kitchen in New York, and I'll make you great." That night, everything changed. 2 weeks later, I stood in my parents' beautiful living room, explaining why I was leaving out of my MBA program to go to culinary school. The quiet after my announcement was deafening. "This is absolutely unacceptable," my father eventually remarked, his voice dangerously low. "We've invested everything in your education." "Everything except respect for what I actually want," was my reply. My mother's expression stiffened. "If you pursue this hobby, you do so without our financial or other support." Vivian, who had just returned from a year of law school, chuckled coldly. "Always the rebel. Let's see how long you last cooking for minimum wage." Daniel, who already works at a prestigious financial firm, simply seemed embarrassed for me. I departed that night with only my personal savings and a modest suitcase. The next 5 years were the hardest I'd ever known, working 18-hour days, living in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and taking out loans for culinary school. But with Chef Julien's guidance, I thrived. The kitchen's intensity, discipline, and inventiveness nourished me in ways that business school never could. Then came the opportunity to change everything. An investor who tried my food at one of Julien's parties approached me with a business pitch. Maison launched 2 years ago, with me as executive chef and partial owner. 6 months later, I bought out my partners and became single proprietor. The irony was not lost on me that I had ended up using my business education, but not in the way my parents had intended. Maison soon became the most difficult reservation to get in the city. Last month, Food and Wine magazine included us in their Future of American Cuisine issue. Throughout this, I kept my distance from my family, occasional awkward phone calls with my mother, holiday cards, but nothing serious. They knew I was doing something with food, but they didn't know how successful I was. I chose to keep it that way. I desired recognition for my successes on my own terms, not as a means of eventually gaining their favor. So, when the embossed invitation to Vivian's engagement supper arrived at my place, I was astonished. Even more startling was the location. My own eatery. Of course, they couldn't have known it was mine. They presumably chose it because it was unique and magnificent, ideal for demonstrating their status. After several days of consideration, I decided to accept, not for affirmation, but possibly to finally close a chapter. 5 years of distance had provided me with perspective. I felt confident enough in my success to face them without breaking under their criticism. What I hadn't imagined was how it would feel to watch them dine in my restaurant and criticize the dishes I had worked so hard to create. But that was exactly what awaited me when I pushed open the huge glass doors of Maison that evening, ready to play the role of the struggling black sheep for the final time. As I came through the doors, the familiar aroma of Maison engulfed me: saffron, reduced wine, and the faint perfume of fresh herbs, which I insisted on having delivered twice a day. Usually, this perfume grounded me and reminded me of everything I'd accomplished. Tonight, it only made me more anxious. I had carefully chosen my clothes: a modest black dress by Diane von Furstenberg, embellished with a single strand of pearls belonging to my grandmother. My status-conscious relatives would most likely misinterpret my understated elegance as an attempt to make do with inadequate resources. My hair was pulled back into a tidy chignon, which they would likely read as me being unable to afford good styling. Adrian, my most senior server, noticed me right away, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. I rarely entered via the front door as a guest. I gave him a delicate shake of my head and mouthed, "Not yet." He nodded silently and resumed his tasks. I could see them from the entryway. They'd requested the middle table. My mother and Chanel, and my father examining the wine list with intense focus. Vivian wore what appeared to be new season Gucci. Next to her sat a man I didn't recognize, possibly Olivia, with slicked back hair and a watch that caught the light whenever he moved his wrist. Daniel and his wife Callista completed the picture, dressed in business clothing as if they had just returned from an important conference. Celeste, my hostess, she approached with a friendly smile. Good evening, miss. She stopped herself just in time. Your party is already seated, may I show you to their table? Thank you, Celeste, I said quietly, appreciating her caution. As we neared, my mother recognized me, her eyes making a swift assessment that I knew from childhood. A head-to-toe scan determined the approximate value of my attractiveness, and found it lacking. Dar, she replied, rising to air-kiss my cheek. You finally arrived. We were beginning to wonder. I'm exactly on time, mother, I said, checking my watch. 7 on the dot. My father stood and gave me a stiff hug, followed by an awkward pat on the back. You look healthy, he said, implying that I hadn't kept up the borderline unhealthy slenderness valued in our social circles. Vivian barely stood, offering me her cheek to kiss. This is Olivia, she said, as her fiancé rose and extended his hand. His grasp was overly tight, a power move I recognized from numerous business meetings. Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, he explained. Just made junior partner at Goldman. There's no nice to meet you, or, I've heard about you, simply credentials and status. The Mitchells enjoy language. Daniel gave me a more sincere hello, but his wife Callista's grin appeared strained. I subsequently learnt she had been assigned with locating this extremely exclusive restaurant for tonight's dinner, and she was concerned about whether it would match everyone's expectations. Well, my mother began as I took the last unoccupied seat. We've already ordered champagne. I hope that's okay. I noted they had chosen the most costly option on our list. Showy but not reckless. Typical. The restaurant hummed with the enthusiasm I had worked so hard to create. The lighting was dark enough for intimacy, and bright enough to highlight each dish's artistic plating. The sound level struck the perfect blend between conversation and seclusion. The tables were perfectly spaced, close enough to produce energy while remaining far enough apart for discretion. Every aspect was my choice, from the linen weight to the custom-designed chairs that encouraged diners to stay without being uncomfortable. I saw the staff's subtle reactions when they learned I was seated with customers. Marco, our sommelier, attracted my attention as he approached with the champagne. The tiniest rise of his brow inquired whether I wanted him to acknowledge me. I gave an inconspicuous headshake. Excellent choice, he told my father instead, presenting the bottle with practiced elegance before starting to pour. We're celebrating an engagement, my father added unnecessarily, obviously looking for special treatment. Congratulations, Marco said effortlessly. Maison is honored to host such a special occasion. I'm surprised you managed to make a reservation, I responded casually. I've heard it's quite difficult. Olivia leaned forward. I know people, he said with a wink. I had to repress an eye roll since he was so smug, called in a favor with a client who's friendly with the management. I was chewing my lips. The client was most likely Craig Winters, one of our frequent investors who occasionally requested tables for business associates. I made a mental note to talk to him about Olivia. Well, aren't you resourceful? I inquired, extending my champagne flute to Vivian and Olivia. A perfect match and a brilliant future, my father said. We clinked glasses, and I took a little sip, observing that the champagne was poured at the exact temperature I had instructed my staff to keep. So, my mother said, setting down her glass and focusing her gaze on me. Tell us what you've been up to these past few years. You've been so mysterious. The table's attention moved to me. 5 pairs of eyes evaluating and preparing to evaluate. I've been working in food, I answered simply. Learning, growing. Are you still in that cooking phase? Vivian sighed, as if I'd admitted to a dreadful addiction. I thought surely by now you'd have moved on to something more substantial. Not everyone can handle the corporate path, Daniel added, making his argument sound like criticism. Olivia looked perplexed. What exactly do you do? Line cook, catering, and various roles, I replied vaguely. I've worn many hats. Well, we're just glad you're able to support yourself, my mother remarked, with a phony graciousness I recognized. Though we've always said our door is open if things get too challenging. I observed Ivy, one of our most skilled servers, approaching with the amuse-bouche, which was a bite-sized sphere of compressed watermelon covered with fermented black garlic and a microgreen I had obtained from a specialized urban farm. "Compliments of the kitchen," she said, delicately setting one before each diner. Her eyes caught mine briefly, a spark of loyalty before she returned to professional mode. "Is this all?" Vivian inquired, looking at the single taste with despair. "I'm hungry." "This is an amuse-bouche," I explained. "A palate opener. The meal hasn't actually started yet." "I know what an amuse-bouche is, duh," she murmured. "I'm not culturally illiterate just because I chose law instead of playing with food." I watched as they all tried my creation. My mother took the tiniest possible bite, always mindful of calories. My father shoved the entire item into his mouth, barely hesitating to taste it. Daniel and Callista appeared to enjoy it, although Olivia made a show of evaluating the flavors like a wine connoisseur, using culinary phrases that made no sense. Only Vivian left hers undisturbed. "I don't do raw garlic," she stated. Though the black garlic was far from raw, it had been fermented for 60 days in a temperature-controlled atmosphere, a technique I had honed over 3 years of experimentation. As our server cleared the dishes, I noticed a look of sadness in her eyes at Vivian's untouched handiwork. In that moment, I felt protective. Not of myself, but of my employees, who took great pride in their work. I had created Maison not only as a restaurant, but also as a family, united by shared enthusiasm rather than DNA. The evening had only barely begun, but I could already feel the old dynamic settling in. I was the outsider, the one who had chosen the incorrect route and wanted to justify my decisions. But unlike Draw 5 years before, I now sat at this table with a secret strength. One that would eventually throw the entire relationship on its head. "So, tell us about the wedding plans," I began, purposefully diverting my gaze back to Vivian as our next course arrived. A delicate combination of homegrown tomatoes, homemade ricotta, and basil oil that took me months to master. Vivian brightened instantly. "We've booked St. Thomas Church, of course. Reception at the plaza for 100 guests, though Mother thinks we should cut it to 350. "The guest list is getting unwieldy," my mother interjected. "The Astor Williams aren't speaking to the Bennetts since that unfortunate yacht incident, so we can't seat them in the same section." I restrained a smile. The seriousness with which they analyze these societal calculations never ceased to astound me. 400 seems excessive, I ventured, taking a taste of the tomato dish. Olivia leaned forwards. "It's networking, not just celebration. Half those invitations are relationship investments." "Exactly," my father agreed. "Olivia understands the social capital aspect. A wedding of this caliber opens doors." "And what about you, Dar?" Vivian inquired, her tone suddenly stern. "Any prospects on your horizon, or are you still too busy with your cooking?" I observed she had scarcely touched her lunch, moving the heirloom tomatoes around her dish with apparent disdain. "I'm focused on my career right now," I replied simply. "Career?" Daniel said with a slight laugh. "Is that what we're calling it?" My mom jumped in. "Dar dear, surely by 29 you're thinking about settling down. There's that lovely son of Elizabeth Whitley. He's in hospital administration, I believe. Very stable." "I'm not looking to be set up, Mother." "Well, your options will get more limited with each passing year," she said, "especially in your situation." Before I could answer, our server appeared and cleared the course. I hadn't really detected the taste of my own invention since I was too stressed to fully enjoy it. "Is there a problem with the dish?" Ivy inquired Vivian, noticing her fully filled plate. "Too acidic," Vivian said dismissively. "And the tomatoes could have been riper." I bit my tongue. Those tomatoes had been picked at their finest that morning from an upstate farm that produced them just for us. "I'm sorry to hear that," Ivy responded with studied diplomacy. "I'll be sure to inform the kitchen." The next item arrived, grilled scallops with a brown butter emulsion and pickled ramps, a spring special that I was quite proud of. As the platters were laid down, I saw my family's reactions. "Now this looks promising," my father said, biting into a scallop with a fork. He swirled his wine, a Sancerre that I had specially chosen to go with this entree. "Decent wine list here. Not exceptional, but passable." Marco, overhearing as he passed, gave me a swift glance. I gave him a gentle smile. Marco had been poached from a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris and had turned down offers from restaurants all around the world to collaborate with me. "So Dra," Callista began, clearly attempting to include me. "Daniel mentioned you work in food, but you never really specified what you do." Before I could respond, Vivian interrupted. She's probably hostessing somewhere, right, Dar? Using that business degree to seat people and hand out menus. Actually, I began. No shame in that, my father interjected. Everyone has to start somewhere. Though after 5 years, I would have expected some advancement. I've advanced, I answered quietly. Into what? Assistant manager at Applebee's? Vivian giggled at her own joke. Vivian, Daniel warned, demonstrating a rare moment of protection. What? I'm just being realistic. She chose to abandon her education for this passion project. Actions have consequences. I took a drink of wine, allowing the familiar flavors to ground me. And how is the law treating you, Vivian? Are you still at Henderson and Block? Her expression stiffened. I'm between positions at the moment. Actually, taking time to plan the wedding. She was working too many hours, Olivia interjected. I told her my wife doesn't need to kill herself at some firm once we are married. She can do charity work like my mother. I noticed a spark of resentment. Frustration? In Vivian's eyes, before she returned to a calm expression of agreement. The next entree was a pasta dish with hand-rolled tagliatelle, spring peas, pancetta, and mint. One of our specialty recipes has been featured in Food and Wine. The portion size here is ridiculous, my mother said, glancing at the elegantly presented spaghetti. All this expense for 3 bites. It's about quality over quantity, Mother, you said. The tasting menu is designed to take you through multiple flavors and textures. In my day, restaurants gave you a proper meal for your money, my father said. This cuisine nonsense is just a way to charge more for less food. I watched as he chopped his spaghetti rather than spin it, breaking the beautiful strands I had hand-rolled that morning. So, how exactly are you affording a place like this on a food service salary? Vivian inquired plainly. This is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I felt all eyes on me. I manage my finances carefully, I said. Oh please, Vivian scoffed. A dinner here costs more than you probably make in a day. Who are you dating? Is he paying for this? I'm not dating anyone, I replied evenly. Then how can you possibly afford this place? She pressed. Are you in debt? Maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances? Vivian, Daniel warned again, looking uneasy. No, I want to know, she said. We all rearranged our schedules for this dinner that she suggested at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Either she's being financially irresponsible or she's not being honest about her situation. The next item arrived. Wonderfully cooked duck breast served with cherry gastrique and farro. Chef Sophia, who was in charge of the kitchen when I wasn't around, had done an excellent job. This duck is undercooked, Olivia said after one bite. I looked at his plate. The duck was cooked perfectly medium rare like it should be. It's meant to be served that way, I said. Medium rare is the optimal temperature for duck breast. I prefer my meat well done, he said, motioning to a waitress. When Ivy approached, he spoke without glancing at her. This is raw. Take it back and cook it properly. I observed a flash of displeasure in Ivy's eyes, which was soon concealed by professional courtesy. Of course, sir. My apologies. As she took his plate, I caught her gaze and gave a little nod. She would know to have the kitchen prepare a new breast rather than overcooking the current one. Really, Draw? My mother remarked after Ivy had left. You still haven't answered Vivian's question. How are you affording this dinner? The tension around the table was apparent now. I could feel the familiar heaviness in my chest, something I'd experienced at innumerable family dinners growing up. The feeling of being cornered, assessed, and found wanting before I had a chance to speak. But I was no longer the same insecure young woman. I had created something I was proud of, and it was entirely mine. I debated revealing everything right then, seeing their emotions alter as they recognized which restaurant they were in and whose dish they had been evaluating so casually. Before I could make a decision, Olivia's overdone duck reappeared, devoid of all suppleness and nuance. Much better, he declared after one bite, despite the fact that I could see from across the table that it had dried out and become tough. My father signaled for the wine list again. Let's order another bottle, something more impressive this time. As Marco approached with the leather-bound list, my father made a show of perusing it before pointing to one of our most costly options, a Bordeaux costing more than $800. This one should suffice, he declared. I knew that bottle quite well. I chose it during a trip to France last year and met with the vintner in person. It was wonderful, but entirely inappropriate for the present and next courses. May I suggest something that might pair better with the remaining dishes? I thought about it. My father waved me off. I think I know my wines, Dar. Marco caught my eye and softly asked for directions. I gave him a slight nod. Let my father have his way. This was hardly the hill to die on. The punches continued throughout the evening, including the last savory dish and dessert, a deconstructed lemon tart that was one of my personal favorites. Every dish drew some criticism. Every attempt I made to add to the conversation turned into proof of my failure. By the time coffee was served, I was emotionally exhausted. The double strain of suffering my family's disdain while witnessing them casually criticize my life's work was becoming unbearable. Then came the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating, the check. Adrian approached with a black leather folder carrying the bill and placed it discreetly in the center of the table. My father reached for it instinctively out of patriarchal duty, but Olivia intervened. Please, Charles, allow me, he urged with the practiced smoothness of someone who has used even charity as a power move. Consider it my treat to celebrate the occasion. My father made the typical modest protest before giving in. I watched Olivia open the folder, his demeanor changing from confident smile to barely veiled horror as he recorded the sum. Is there a problem? My father inquired, noting the shift. No, Olivia responded swiftly. Just confirming the calculation. I recognized what he was looking at. A dinner for 7 including premium wine pairings, special off-menu requests, and the $800 Bordeaux would cost well over $3,000. Not exorbitant for a restaurant of Maison's caliber, but certainly noteworthy. He grabbed for his wallet and slowly removed a black credit card, making sure everyone noticed the exclusive tier. Vivian, probably sensing his uneasiness, picked that opportunity to return to her previous probing. So, she began, her voice full of false sweetness. You never did say how you're managing to contribute to this extravagant dinner. We wouldn't want you stretching yourself financially on our account. All eyes returned to me. I could feel the classic dynamic emerging. Vivian the successful one, myself the suffering letdown. I can cover my portion, I replied simply. Can you though? She asked, leaning forward. Because we all know what food service pays. Can you even afford this place? The table went silent. The question hovered in the air, so purposefully offensive that even my parents were uncomfortable. Vivian, my mother whispered. Perhaps this isn't. No, I want to know, Vivian argued, her eyes fixed on mine. We've spent the entire evening pretending that everything's fine, that Dar's choice to throw away her education hasn't left her struggling. I think we deserve some honesty. I felt a scorching heat rise up from my chest to my cheeks. After 5 years of distance, of developing my own life and success, nothing has changed. I was still the family's disappointment, and I was pushed to defend my presence. Olivia, possibly feeling an opportunity to regain control following the initial shock, joined in. If you need help with your portion, just say so. No shame in that. I don't need help, I stated, my voice tight. Then how exactly are you paying for this? Vivian inquired. Because a meal here costs more than you probably make in a week. I opened my lips to answer, finally revealing everything, when Olivia frowned at the bill. Wait, there's a mistake here, he said. They've only charged us for the wines, not the food, he said sternly to Adrian. Excuse me. There's an error on our check. Adrian approached our table with perfect timing, as if he had been waiting for this moment. He most likely had been. My employees knew me well enough to be watching this scenario unfold. Is there a problem, sir? He inquired. Yes, you only charged us for the beverages and not the meal, Olivia responded, referring to the bill. Adrian stared at the check and then at me, his expression uncertain. In that moment, I made my decision. The charade had lasted long enough. I gave Adrian a small nod. There's no error, sir, Adrian responded calmly. The dinner portion has been taken care of. By whom? My father inquired, wondering. Adrian turned to face me, his professional manner giving way to a friendly smile. Welcome back, Miss Isabella. Your usual table is ready for your meeting with the investors. Would you like me to handle the situation? There was utter stillness over the table. 6 pairs of eyes looked at me with varying degrees of astonishment and incredulity. Thank you, Adrian, I murmured, my voice firm despite the excitement running through me. Yes, please close out Mr. Harrington's beverage tab. The rest is on the house, as usual. Very good, Miss Dar, he said, removing the folder from Olivia's now slack grip. Chef Sophia mentioned she'd like your opinion on the new spring menu items when you have a moment. I'll stop by the kitchen before my meeting, I told him. As Adrian left, I stared directly at my family. Their reactions ranged from bewilderment to astonishment to the dawn of understanding. What is happening? My mother finally asked. I took a deep breath. The moment I had dreaded and secretly anticipated for 5 years had arrived. "Welcome to Maison," I replied simply. "My restaurant." The silence lasted for what seemed like an age. My father was the first to recover, his face changing from confused to calculated. "Your restaurant," he said gently. "You work here." "No, father," I said, feeling a weird serenity settle over me. "I own Maison, I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor." "That's impossible," Vivian exclaimed. "This is one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It's been featured in major magazines." "Yes, I agree. Food and Wine last month. Bon Appetit before that. The New York Times gave us 4 stars in their review last year." Olivia stared at me as if I had suddenly begun speaking in tongues. But you said you worked in food, you were vague about everything." "Because I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was struggling. I told you. And you've all made that abundantly clear tonight." My mother's hand fluttered to her pearls, her go-to gesture when socially unstable. "Darling, why wouldn't you tell us about this achievement?" Her emphasis on achievement said it all. Success made my decisions retrospectively acceptable in a way that passion never could. "Would you like the full story?" I inquired, glancing around the table. Without waiting for a response, I continued. "After I left 5 years ago, I moved to the city with what little savings I had. I rented a tiny room in an apartment with 3 roommates in Queens. For a year, I worked 3 jobs: prep cook at a bistro from 5 a.m. to noon, line cook at a midtown restaurant from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m., and weekend shifts at a bakery." I took a sip of water and noticed their uneasy expressions. "I slept 4 hours a night. I had blisters and burns up and down my arms. I studied technique obsessively in my rare free moments. Chef Julian, who had initially encouraged me to pursue culinary arts, took me under his wing. I became his sous chef within 18 months. Daniel looked at me with what appeared to be genuine attention. Callista seemed impressed. My parents appeared frozen in a condition of reappraisal. 2.5 years ago, I was working a private event at Julian's restaurant. A guest, Edward Lane of Lane Capital, tried my special course and asked to meet the chef. He was surprised to find someone so young had created what he called the most innovative dish he'd tasted in years. I made a circle around us. Edward became my investor. We discovered the location, which was a failed nightclub at the time. I created the concept, designed the menu, hired the personnel, and handled every detail, even the lighting fixtures and specialty plates. "But the cost," my father remarked, his thoughts still apparently focused on the economics. "A restaurant of this caliber, in this location, it must have required millions." $3,400,000 for the initial investment, I verified. And Edward brought in 2 other investors. We opened to immediate acclaim, thanks in part to Julian's backing and industry ties. 6 months later, we were profitable. 3 months later, I used the restaurant's performance to acquire a loan and buy out my investors. I've been the sole owner for over a year. "That's why you suggested we meet here," Vivian said quietly. "You knew all along." "Actually no," I corrected her. "Callista chose this place." "Is that correct, Callista?" All eyes were drawn to Daniel's wife, who blushed profoundly. "I had no idea, Dara. The concierge at Daniel's firm recommended it as the most impressive new restaurant in town. I swear I didn't realize it was yours." "Of course you didn't," I comforted her. "And no one in the family knew. That was deliberate on my part." "But why keep it a secret?" My mother pressed. "We are your family. We would have been proud." I couldn't help but chuckle sharply. "Would you? The same family that dismissed cooking as servant work, who completely ignored me when I chose culinary school, and who just minutes ago made disparaging remarks about my life choices." My father cleared his throat. "Now that's unjust. We were anxious about your stability and future. If we'd known you had this level of commercial acumen." "That's exactly my argument," I interjected. "You couldn't appreciate my passion only. It only has worth for you now because it is associated with achievement and prestige." Chef Sophia entered our table in her crisp whites. Sofia Delgado, chef de cuisine, monogrammed on the breast, and cut an attractive figure. "Sorry to interrupt, she began. But the Matsuhisa party has arrived for their tasting, and Armand would like to confirm your interview for next week's feature. Also, your publisher inquired regarding the cookbook cover design." I nodded. "Thank you, Sophia. Please let them know I'll be there shortly." As Sophia walked away, I noticed my family's eyes widen in surprise. "Cookbook," Vivian repeated. "Coming out this fall with Knopf?" I replied. 120 recipes with personal stories. Draw, my mother continued, her voice taking on the soothing tone she used when attempting to control a social situation. This is all really amazing. Why haven't you told us sooner? We could have assisted and supported you. How did you support me when I needed it the most? I asked quietly. By entirely shutting me off? We believed it was a phase, my father complained. How did we know you had such a strong entrepreneurial spirit? You have clearly inherited my business sense. I was furious at his attempt to take credit for my achievement. I built this myself, I replied firmly, without your connections, money, or support. Olivia, who had been curiously silent, suddenly brightened up. A cookbook agreement must come with a significant advance. And this location, he gestured around appreciatively, his earlier criticisms forgotten, must generate big revenue. Do you have plans to expand? Maybe a restaurant group? I have several contacts in hotel investment who may be interested. I couldn't help but grin at the honesty of this shift from condescension to networking opportunity. I'm doing quite well with my current advisors, but thank you, I replied. Vivian gave him an irritated glance before returning my gaze. So, all this time, when I thought you were failing, you were actually succeeding, building all this? Yes, I answered simply. And tonight, she said, her voice sharpening. You let us sit here criticizing your food, wine list and portion sizes, all while knowing it was yours. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was still the family failure, I'd said. And now I know. That seems manipulative, she snapped. But I could feel her discomfort behind her rage. What's more deceptive than questioning how I could afford to eat here and then implying that I must be in debt or dating someone affluent to afford a lunch at this table? I responded. You weren't concerned about me, Vivian. You were relishing your perceived supremacy. As we spoke, the restaurant was gradually emptying as the evening service came to an end, and Marco approached with a bottle. Your special reserve cognac, Miss Isabella, he explained, for your investors' meeting, and Chef Sophia says the kitchen is ready whenever you arrive. Thank you, Marco, I told you. Please let Sophia know I'll be there in 10 minutes. As he walked away, I went back to my startled family and said, I have a business to run, rising from my seat. Thank you for coming this evening. Wait, my mother shouted hastily. Do not leave like this, we should congratulate your success. Perhaps we could all have brunch this weekend and catch up properly. I looked at her and saw for the first time not the terrifying figure of my upbringing, but a lady attempting to reclaim her pride and status. I'll think about it, you replied. But right now, I have investors waiting and a kitchen to oversee. As I started to go, Daniel stood up. Dar, he said, his voice softer than the others. For what it's worth, what you've built here is incredible. It's remarkable. I apologize for not supporting you sooner. Of all the responses, his felt the most genuine. I gave him a modest gesture of recognition before leaving the table where I had just altered the dynamics of my family forever. I had just walked 10 feet when I heard the click of heels behind me. Turning around, I saw my mother rushing to catch up, her flawlessly poised facade beginning to crumble. Please, she begged, lowering her voice. You can't just dismiss this insight and go away. We need to discuss this. I looked toward the private dining room, where my genuine investors, a group of people considering finance for my next restaurant concept, were waiting. I have a meeting, Mother. Postpone it, she pleaded. This is family. Family hasn't been a priority for you in 5 years, I responded, maintaining a steady tone. My business commitments don't suddenly become optional because you finally decided my career is worthy of your attention. The rest of the family had followed her, forming an awkward cluster near the bar area. My father was visibly uncomfortable, unaccustomed to not being in control of a situation. Vivian's expression alternated between bitterness and something that could have been respect. Perhaps we could continue this conversation tomorrow, my father proposed in his problem-solving business tone. Dinner at our place. We have a lot to talk about, Olivia said hopefully, including how we can help you grow. My firm specializes in... I don't need your help, I said firmly. I didn't develop this place only to get your approval. I built it since it's what I enjoy and am good at. The fact that it's successful doesn't make my passion any more valid than it was 5 years ago. No one is saying that, my mother countered. Darling, we're simply proud of what you've accomplished. Are you proud, Mom? Or are you pleased that my choices no longer make you feel embarrassed in social situations? Her flinch informed me I had struck near to home. That's unfair, my father said. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I corrected him. You wanted what was consistent with your vision for me. There is a difference. Sophia stood by my side, her presence a pleasant reassurance. The Halvard group is asking if you'll be joining them soon, she whispered quietly. 5 minutes, I assured her. As Sophia nodded and went away, I returned my attention to my family. I need to go. Draw. Vivian took a step nearer, her voice lacking its normal harsh edge. I owe you an apology. The things I said tonight were unkind. They were honest, I said. That's the silver lining of the evening. I got to witness exactly how you guys perceive me when you believe I'm struggling. That's not fair, Daniel replied, joining the argument. People make decisions based on what they know. We didn't know. You didn't know I was successful, I clarified. But you didn't know I was doing something I enjoyed. That should have been sufficient for my family to demonstrate fundamental respect. A deep silence fell over the group. You're right, my father finally remarked, startling me. We should have supported your passion regardless of its outcome. This acknowledgement was significant since Charles Mitchell didn't admit faults readily. Where should we go from here? My mother inquired, genuine uncertainty in her voice, another rare. I took a deep breath and considered the topic. Despite everything, these people were my family. The grief they caused was real, but so was our shared history. I had never aimed for complete estrangement, just enough distance to construct my own life without their judgment clouding my decisions. I don't know yet, I replied candidly. But tonight has made one thing plain. If we are to continue our relationship, we must do it on different terms. I'm not a family failure looking for redemption. I am a successful chef and business owner who deserves the same respect as any other professional. Of course, my father responded promptly. And that means no more comments about my life choices, no more unsolicited career advice, and absolutely no attempts to network through my restaurant, I said, casting a hard glance at Olivia, who managed to appear ashamed. About Vivian's wedding, my mother asked tentatively. How about it? I asked. We'd still like you to be there, Vivian whispered softly. As my sister. Not as whatever we thought you were before tonight. I glanced at her, trying to see past the years of competitiveness and judgment. Despite everything, there had been beautiful times. Secrets shared as youngsters, support after heartbreaks, intimate jokes no one else understood. I'll be there, I vowed. Then after a moment of thought, I added, and if you'd like, I could host a dinner for the wedding party here at Maison as my gift. Vivian's eyes widened. You'd do that, after how we've treated you. You're still my sister, I answered simply. But, to be clear, I'm not seeking your approval. It's me presenting something I'm proud of on my own terms. I understand, she replied quietly. And I would be honored. We exchanged genuine smiles for the first time that evening. Now I really do need to go, I remarked, pointing to the private dining room. Of course, my father said. Your business comes first. Not always, I told him, but tonight, yes. As they prepared to leave, I mentioned, I'm free for brunch on Sunday. Not in your club, however. There's a small establishment in the East Village that I suggest you should visit. We'll be there, my mother said, relieved at the slight opening. As I watched them leave the restaurant, their viewpoints had irreparably changed, and as the door closed behind them, I exhaled deeply, feeling strangely lighter. Sophia approached again. Is everything okay? Getting there, I responded. Family is complicated. Tell me about it, she said. My mother still introduces me as her daughter who works at a restaurant, like I'm a teenage waitress at Denny's. I smiled, pleased for her understanding. Let's go talk about the spring menu. I am very excited about some of my new ideas. As we proceeded toward the kitchen, my refuge, my achievement, my actual home, I understood that the most important discovery of the evening was not showing my family what I'd accomplished, but completely recognizing it myself. I had achieved this achievement on my own terms, without their approval, and that understanding was more valuable than any recognition they could possibly provide. Spring menu planning, meetings with my publisher regarding the cookbook layout, and preliminary negotiations about a potential second location kept me quite busy for the past 2 weeks. But recollections of that family supper stayed, intruding in quiet moments, demanding reflection. Sunday breakfast had gone unexpectedly well. I'd brought my family to Elma's, a hidden treasure managed by a former colleague from my early days working the line. My parents had been visibly uneasy about the mismatched chairs and graffiti-decorated walls, but the food, unpretentious yet masterfully executed, had won them over. I never knew simple eggs could taste like this. my father had admitted, mopping up the last of his shakshuka with homemade sourdough. Small steps. Not a complete transformation, but an opening. Sitting at my usual table after closing time, I watched the staff complete their final duties. Ivy was counting the register while humming softly. Adrian and Marco were discussing wine pairings for tomorrow's private event. Sophia had left an hour ago after we'd finalized the spring menu revisions. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Wedding planning nightmare. Florist just doubled their quote. Any chance you're free for coffee tomorrow? Could use some straight. I smiled slightly at this unexpected request for my opinion, and I texted back, confirming a time and place. The relationship with my family was evolving into something I couldn't have predicted. Measured respect between adults with different values and paths. My mother had called 3 times in the last 2 weeks, her usual formality softening into genuine questions about my work. My father had sent an article about female chefs breaking barriers in the industry, a silent acknowledgement that he was trying to understand my world. And Daniel had reached out, asking if he could bring his children to see the kitchen sometime. I want them to know they have options, he'd said, that success doesn't have to look the same for everyone. These were fragile beginnings, not the dramatic reconciliation of a Hollywood movie. Real healing, I discovered, occurs in quiet moments and modest gestures, in the incremental rewriting of old patterns. The most significant shift, however, was not in my family's image of me, but in how I had finally stopped assessing my worth through their eyes. The validation I had always frantically sought from them now felt strangely unneeded, since I had proven myself, not to them, but to myself. This realization had rippled through other areas of my life as well. I'd launched a mentorship program for young chefs from disadvantaged backgrounds, offering them the guidance and opportunity I'd fought so hard to find. Chef? Ivy's voice interrupted my thoughts. We're all ready for closing. Is there anything else you need before we leave? No, thank you. I cracked a joke. You all did amazing work tonight. As the staff went out, calling their good nights, I remained at my seat, my notebook open to a blank page. I'd been attempting to articulate the introduction to my cookbook, fighting to find words that conveyed my trip, and in the stillness of the empty restaurant, I finally began writing. Food has always been my truest language. When words failed, I communicated through flavors, and when pathways were obscure, I followed my palate. The recipes in this book are more than just recipes. They're chapters of a life lived in quest of authenticity above approval. 5 years ago, I was at a crossroads between expectation and passion. Choosing the latter cost me dearly at first, but ultimately led to the richest feast I could have imagined. Not only professional success, but the discovery that true wealth isn't measured by external validation or material achievement, but by the courage to honor your own voice, even when it speaks in whispers against the shouts of doubt. I lay down my pen, the words finally flowing freely. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges. A difficult vendor negotiation, Vivian's wedding planning drama, and the finalization of the cookbook introduction, but today, in this moment of peaceful thought, I felt inner calm. The journey had not been easy. There had been nights of exhaustion so complete that I'd fallen asleep in kitchen corners during rare breaks, burns and cuts that left scars on my hands, and moments of doubt so intense that I'd questioned everything. But I had persevered. Not to prove my worth to others, but because I couldn't imagine living any other way. By choosing authenticity above acceptance, I discovered something more valuable than success or familial validation. Myself. Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and following your own heart? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more true stories of resilience and triumph, and share with someone who may need a reminder that the most important approval comes from within. Thank you for joining me on this journey.